On a quiet summer evening in June 2007, the small town of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, was shaken by a mystery that would haunt its residents for years. 70-year-old Polly DeVore seemed to vanish without a trace. Her farmhouse was left in chaos. Furniture overturned, documents scattered, bullet holes in the kitchen wall, yet almost no blood, no signs of forced entry, and no clear struggle. Her car remained in the driveway, but she herself was gone. What began as a suspected home invasion soon unraveled into something far darker. As investigators peeled back the layers of the DeVore family's life, they uncovered secrets of betrayal and a murder plot so twisted. This is the chilling story of how a seemingly ordinary family, respected in their community, it was torn apart by lies, greed, and revenge. In 2007, Pauline "Polly" DeVore, 70 years old, and her husband Bob DeVore, 65, were well-known residents of Siloam Springs, a quiet town in northwest Arkansas. Both had been married before finding each other. Polly's first marriage to Robert Howler lasted a decade and produced 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. After the divorce, custody went to Robert, leaving Polly free to start over. She remarried a year later, and this second marriage was far more stable. Though she and her new husband had no children together, they poured their energy into building wealth, investing in land and apartments. 2 decades later, tragedy struck. Polly's husband died of a sudden heart attack, leaving her a widow, alone, and managing a vast property. She eventually crossed paths with Bob DeVore, a man 5 years younger, himself divorced, also searching for companionship. They married in 1987 and, to all appearances, built a steady life together. From the outside, the DeVore's family seems perfect. By 2007, they had been married 20 years, running separate but successful businesses. Polly owned several rental properties in town, while Bob worked the long miles as a truck driver. They gave the impression of a couple who had endured storms and were now preparing to enjoy retirement in comfort. No one could have guessed that June of that year would rip their lives apart. On June 15, 2007, Bob returned home from his job as a truck driver and walked into a nightmare. Their farmhouse was in shambles. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, belongings strewn across the floor. It looked like someone had torn through the house searching for something. Polly's car sat in the driveway, but she was gone. Most alarming of all, bullet holes riddled the kitchen window and wall, a silent marker of violence inside what should have been a safe home. Bob checked the safe and discovered nearly $10,000 missing, along with rental receipts and other financial records. But money was not what panicked him most. It was Polly's absence. She hadn't planned to go anywhere, and nothing suggested she had left voluntarily. To him, it looked like she had been kidnapped. He called the police immediately. When investigators arrived, they too were struck by the contradictions. The house looked ransacked, valuables were missing, and bullet holes marked the kitchen. But where was the struggle? Only a few drops of blood were found. Too little to suggest a violent confrontation. Stranger still, there were no signs of forced entry. The doors and windows were intact, and the alarm system had not been triggered. It was as though the intruder had walked in freely. Bob told police the door had been locked when he arrived, which only deepened the mystery. Detectives began to wonder if this really had been a robbery at all, or if Polly herself had been the target. Bob swore that Polly had no enemies. He described her as gentle, quiet, and deeply artistic, spending hours at home with her drawings. She wasn't involved in shady dealings, he said, nor had she ever received threats. To him, she was a woman who avoided conflict at every turn. But the crime scene suggested otherwise. Something about this disappearance didn't add up. One curious detail Bob did mention to police was his wife's recent streak of good fortune. Polly, he explained, loved visiting casinos and frequented such establishments. He believed she had been incredibly lucky in recent months, having hit the jackpot 4 or even 5 times in a row. Each time she came home with thousands in cash, sometimes more than $5,000. Polly was proud of her winnings, and Bob suspected that her luck might have drawn the wrong kind of attention. Detectives began to build a theory. Perhaps someone had noticed Polly's casino success and targeted her. Maybe, during Bob's absence, she had gone to gamble again, won big, and been followed home. That would explain the lack of forced entry. The intruder could have confronted her outside, taken her keys, and walked in without setting off the alarm. But if robbery was the only motive, why take rental receipts and bank documents in addition to cash? The choice of stolen items hinted at someone who knew the family's business, or even a client familiar with Polly's dealings. Investigators next questioned Polly's daughter, 47-year-old Dolores Eggert, who lived in a guest house on the ranch and often helped with chores. Dolores said she last saw her mother on June 14, the day before the disappearance. Polly seemed calm and didn't appear to be upset. She remembered. Dolores insisted she didn't believe her mother had problems serious enough to lead to an abduction. She also claimed she hadn't heard gunshots on the property, explaining that she may have been out shopping when the break-in occurred. A ranch worker, Monica Bautista, confirmed Dolores's account. Meanwhile, Bob clung to hope that Polly was still alive. A search and rescue operation was launched, with law enforcement canvassing the area, notifying the public, and asking witnesses to come forward. But after 2 days, there were no suspects, no clear leads, and still no trace of Polly. Rumors of the strange events at the DeVore home spread quickly through town. Then, a neighbor came forward with disturbing information about Dolores. He told police that on June 16, the day after the supposed burglary, Dolores had shown up at his house behaving oddly. She handed him guns and ammunition, claiming they belonged to her stepfather, asked him to hide them on his property until things settled down. According to the neighbor, Dolores said she hadn't seen her mother, believed the house had been robbed, and worried that Bob could get into trouble since he didn't have a firearm permit. She promised to notify the police herself, but never did, suspicious of her behavior. The neighbor turned the weapons over to law enforcement. Detectives soon confirmed that Dolores had not contacted them at all. Coupled with her attempt to hide her stepfather's gun, her actions looked far more troubling. The firearm was immediately sent for forensic testing. When detectives brought this up with Bob, he admitted that Dolores hadn't called him either, and that he had no idea where she was. She had vanished from the guest house on the ranch and wasn't answering her phone. Investigators told him to alert them as soon as Dolores reappeared. But the situation was increasingly alarming. She knew her mother was missing, money was stolen, but did not participate in the search and disappeared herself. At this point, Dolores became the prime suspect. Police considered the possibility that she had staged the burglary, stolen money and documents, and fled. But there was also the darker chance that Polly's disappearance and Dolores's vanishing were connected. That Dolores, too, had fallen victim to the same unknown criminal. With thousands of dollars missing and both women gone, investigators had to consider every possibility, even the unlikely scenario of a mother and daughter running away together. The financial investigation into Polly and her daughter, Dolores, soon revealed troubling dynamics inside the DeVore family. Beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary lives, there were cracks. Polly and Dolores had never shared the warm bond of mother and daughter. Dolores had been raised mostly by her father, and when she did live with Polly, their relationship was volatile. Neighbors recalled frequent quarrels that sometimes escalated into physical fights. Years later, Dolores moved back in with her mother, hoping to repair their relationship. For a while, things appeared normal, but old tensions resurfaced. Polly criticized Dolores for being unemployed and for her provocative style of dress, insisting she should live on her own. Their conflicts weren't new. As a teenager, Dolores had been so difficult that Polly sent her to live with her father in Texas, labeling her lazy and immature. That decision left Dolores deeply resentful. In Texas, instead of maturing, Dolores became involved with a man who had a criminal history. He sold banned substance, had multiple arrests, and served several prison terms. Through this relationship, Dolores herself fell into addiction. This link to the criminal underworld gave detectives a new theory. Perhaps Dolores and her boyfriend had conspired in Polly's disappearance. They may have planned a kidnapping for ransom. But no ransom demands ever came. Investigators turned again to Bob, Polly's husband, seeking clarity. His version of events conflicted with the darker accounts they had gathered. Bob insisted that years earlier, Polly had taken Dolores back, not out of obligation, but out of love. Blaming herself for pushing Dolores away, Polly wanted to help her daughter recover. Bob said Dolores was given steady work, helping to manage the ranch and their rental properties. She was even paid a salary so she could build independence. According to Bob, Dolores had turned her life around. She no longer used banned substance and was finally thinking about her future. He completely dismissed the idea that Dolores could have harmed her mother, dismissing witness testimony, but Bob's unwavering defense of Dolores raised suspicions of his own. Detectives began considering another possibility, that Bob himself had played a role in his wife's disappearance. His alibi, a business trip out of town, was scrutinized. Could he have arranged for someone else to do the job? Investigators combed through receipts, phone records, and his digital communications. In the end, the timeline of his trip checked out. Bob was indeed away when Polly vanished. Still, police did not completely rule him out. Hiring a hitman was not impossible. Though it seemed increasingly unlikely, the case stalled again. With both Polly and Dolores missing, and no ransom or clear leads, detectives turned their attention to the family's business dealings. Polly, who owned several properties, was known for being blunt. Tenants sometimes failed to pay, requiring her to be firm. She carried cash almost daily, collecting rent in person and keeping a bag full of bills. Receipts at her side, she allowed no delays in payment. If rent wasn't paid on time, she would return the next day with the sheriff to evict them. Though her methods kept business profitable, they also earned her enemies. Detectives began to wonder, had an angry tenant, pushed to the edge by eviction or humiliation, sought revenge? With Polly's reputation for harshness, the possibility could not be dismissed. And now, the investigation had a new direction. As detectives continued questioning people who knew Polly, a more complex picture of her character emerged. Though she had a reputation for being strict, even abrasive, when it came to business, she was also known for her generosity. Polly was active in local charities, regularly donated to community projects, and often lent a helping hand to those in need. Even with her tenants, who sometimes saw her as harsh before, she often paid their utility bills or handled expensive repairs out of her own pocket. To many, she was a stern but ultimately fair woman. This duality puzzled investigators. If Polly was respected and even loved by many in her community, then who would have wanted her dead? Yet several tenants revealed that Polly had changed in recent months. She seemed preoccupied, more distant than before. Where she once deposited rent money directly into the bank, she now began visiting casinos immediately after collecting it. Detectives tracked down her gambling haunts, where employees admitted they knew her well. So well, in fact, that they sometimes called her if she hadn't been around for a while. Surveillance confirmed she had developed a gambling problem. She often lost all the rent money. Her husband claimed she hadn't told either him or Dolores about this. Still, one detail stood out. She had not been seen at the casino on the day of her disappearance or the day before, eliminating the theory that she had vanished during a gambling trip. Suspicion once again shifted toward Bob. Detectives questioned how a man so responsible could allow his wife to squander their future in such a reckless way. It was possible that Bob was aware of her gambling and that a confrontation, intended to stop her, had escalated, resulting in her death in a fit of anger. But the deeper investigators dug into the DeVore family's finances, the more shocking the picture became. Years of quiet accumulation were unraveling. Properties once secure were now mortgaged. Savings depleted. Debts mounting. Polly's gambling addiction had bled their fortune dry, and whispers of substance abuse only darkened the picture. On paper, Bob seemed to have a motive. But when investigators examined Polly's will, the theory collapsed. The will revealed a crucial detail. Bob stood to lose everything if Polly died. The rental properties technically belonged to her late husband and were held in a trust. After Polly's death, the properties would pass to her sons. Bob, despite decades of marriage, was cut out completely. To kill her would mean losing everything. Dolores, too, was excluded from the will. She had no inheritance to gain from her mother's death, making her motive equally murky. Once again, the case hit a frustrating dead end, and yet, Dolores remained at the center of suspicion. Her strange behavior after the disappearance, handing a gun to a neighbor, failing to notify the police, then vanishing herself, suggested she knew more than she was saying. Though officially listed as missing, detectives secured a warrant for her arrest, hoping to track her down alive. More than a week after the disappearance, the search ended. Dolores was found, alive, but in critical condition, nearly 500 kilometers away. She had attempted to end her own life by overdosing on pills. After being stabilized, she was taken into custody. During questioning, Dolores expressed genuine surprise that her disappearance had caused any concern. She denied knowing anything about her mother's fate, claiming Polly had probably gone to the casino for a few days. Dolores insisted the supposed robbery was nothing more than unfortunate coincidence. She portrayed herself as overworked and underpaid, resentful of her mother's control, and eager for independence. But when investigators examined Dolores's electronic devices, the truth began to unravel. Buried in messages and witness reports was a secret more disturbing than anything they had uncovered so far. Dolores was having an affair with her stepfather, Bob. Neighbors later admitted they had occasionally seen the pair kissing passionately when Polly was away. The relationship, detective learned, had begun not long after Dolores returned from Texas, and though the two were discreet, the whispers had been circulating for years. All of this raised even more concern for the police, as it gave both Robert and Dolores a legitimate motive to want Polly dead. Together, they stood to control Polly's business, her home, and the remnants of the family's fortune if Polly were out of the picture. Still, Dolores offered nothing further, and without concrete evidence, detectives could not arrest her. For the time being, Polly's fate remained a mystery. What happened next only deepened suspicions. Within 2 weeks of Polly's disappearance, Dolores openly moved in with Bob, no longer hiding their relationship. She also began managing her mother's affairs, as though Polly were never coming back. To investigators, it was as good as a confession. They no longer believed Polly was alive, yet Dolores was skilled at concealing the truth. For months, the case stalled, until word spread that she had relapsed into her old habits. Despite her claims of sobriety, Dolores was once again using banned substance, and in a small town, such secrets are impossible to keep. Detectives traced her connections to local dealers, suspecting that someone in the criminal underworld might know more, perhaps even whether Dolores had tried to hire a killer. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Polly's longtime housekeeper, Monica Bautista. Arrested for forgery and facing deportation due to her undocumented status, Monica initially denied everything. But with the threat of prison and expulsion hanging over her, she bargained for immunity. In exchange, she gave investigators the confession they had been waiting for. According to Monica, she had witnessed the murder herself. On the day Polly vanished, Dolores confronted her mother at the farmhouse, pointing a gun at her. The weapon jammed, and a violent struggle erupted. Panicked, Monica grabbed a stick and struck Polly, trying to stop the fight. Dolores knocked her mother unconscious with a crowbar and grabbed another gun. She turned around and shot her mother 3 times in the chest, killing her. Together, they attempted to destroy evidence, burning parts of Polly's body before meeting Bob at a casino in Oklahoma. Monica recounts that it was there that Dolores told Bob that Polly had died. Far from shocked, on June 15, Bob DeVore returned home. He used farm machinery to push his wife's burned body into a sinkhole. He shot out the front window of the house to distract police. Monica said, "The murder wasn't some impulsive act. It was a crime carefully plotted by Dolores long before it happened. Every step was so well prepared, so precise, that the only flaw in the plan was Monica herself. Had Dolores acted alone, she might never have been caught. But she needed an accomplice, someone Polly trusted. That's where Monica came in. Dolores manipulated her, convincing her that Polly had discovered their criminal ties and was preparing to turn them in to the police. Afraid for her own future, Monica believed the only way out was to help Dolores. And so, she lured Polly into a secluded corner of the ranch. Polly thought she was simply meeting her assistant, but she did not suspect that a deadly plot was being hatched against her. Bob, Polly's husband, played his own dark role. He helped dispose of the body. As for the motive, Monica believed it all stemmed from years of resentment. Dolores described her mother as cruel and controlling, and deep down, she had carried a burning hatred since childhood. Outwardly, she pretended to reconcile, even returning from Texas to rebuild her relationship and help with the family business. But it was all a facade. Her real intention was vengeance. Even her affair with Bob wasn't about love. It was about taking everything from Polly, including the man she married, guided by Monica. Investigators found the crime scene and the spot where Polly's remains had been burned. It took weeks of painstaking excavation, but forensic experts eventually uncovered bone fragments and several dental crowns belonging to Polly DeVore. Confronted with this evidence, Dolores Eggert was arrested. Once she realized Monica would testify against her, she abandoned all denials and confessed. In August 2010, after reaching a plea agreement, Eggert was sentenced to 30 years in prison for murder. Bob DeVore, meanwhile, clung to his innocence. He claimed he only discovered later that Dolores had killed Polly and insisted he never participated. But no one believed him. Both Dolores and Monica pointed the finger at him, and the evidence told its own story. Investigators said he was fed up with Polly's gambling and reckless spending, and he agreed to help cover up her murder. His gun had even been fired inside the home to stage parts of the crime. In the end, in January 2011, he was convicted of obstruction and evidence tampering, earning 10 years behind bars. Bob's greatest punishment, however, wasn't the prison sentence. It was the devastating realization that Dolores had used him from the start. She never loved him. He was just another pawn in her vendetta against her mother. Bob died of cancer in prison in 2014, but even with Dolores and Bob punished, there's one bitter truth that still haunts Polly's family. Monica, the assistant who lured Polly to her death, delivered a brutal blow to her head, and even helped burn the body, walked away free. To this day, she has never faced justice. For Polly's relatives, that remains the cruelest injustice of all. In a small town in Indiana, where people still pass on a chilling saying, "If you want to kill someone and get away with it, do it in Lawrence County." It was in that land that 19 years old Brooke Baker was brutally murdered in her own apartment, leaving behind a bloody and horrifying scene. Who was the killer? The answer did not come immediately. The case fell into a deadlock until 2 years later, when another female student, Erica Norman, disappeared under similar circumstances. It was then that the criminal link gradually emerged, bringing with it the shocking truth about the murderer lurking in everyday life. This is not just a story about a murder. This is a journey filled with blood and tears, where justice is challenged, and the truth is paid for with the lives of young girls. To understand why Brooke Baker's death was so shocking, we need to go back in time to the childhood and life of a little girl who carried within her dreams, aspirations, and a tragic fate. Brooke Baker was born on April 24, 1978, and was very close to her younger brother and parents. Since childhood, she has loved learning. She dreamed of leaving her small town in Indiana, specifically Lawrence County, which was quite different from typical suburban neighborhoods. Lawrence County was known for its danger. Several murders had occurred there, all unsolved, leading to a dark saying, "If you want to kill someone and get away with it, do it in Lawrence." Unfortunately, the family could not afford to move to a safer place. The Brooke family struggled financially, and high-paying jobs were scarce. Her parents took any opportunity to earn money, but this made her unhappy. She wanted to help her family and dreamed of a better life. Throughout school, she thought about securing a stable job and often discussed her ambitious plans. Her best friend, Shauna, admired her determination and willingness to take action. She was very active and embraced new opportunities, such as writing for the school newspaper and exploring journalism programs at local universities. Shauna praised Brooke's writing after reading one of her articles, which encouraged her to pursue a journalism degree as a first step toward her career goals. She applied to the University of Vincennes in the small town of Vincennes and was thrilled to be accepted. Her friends and family were proud of her achievements. Once at university, she was eager to contribute to the university newspaper, a significant multimedia project for students. Shauna also enrolled at the same university, and they continued to support each other in their journalism studies while gaining experience in teamwork. Brooke maintained her close relationships with her family, and her younger brother Braun often visited her on campus. Even though he was still in high school, Brooke enjoyed socializing and had a knack for connecting with diverse people, which sometimes puzzled her friends. She casually dated multiple guys simultaneously, believing it was simply a way of exploring her options. After moving to campus, Brooke shared a room with a guy named Jason, and they quickly became friends, developing a close bond. However, Brooke soon became interested in another guy named Steve, who reciprocated her feelings. Their relationship developed over time but was marked by ups and downs, resulting in several breakups and reconciliations during their first year. Despite the turbulence in her love life, Brooke became the permanent editor of the student newspaper. At only 18, her talent was recognized, making her the youngest editor in the publication's history. During her tenure, Brooke's writing style evolved. She began to focus on complex and controversial topics, creating articles that provoked readers. While these traits may be useful for a journalist, her focus on sensational issues has led some to question her motives. There were accusations that she had intentionally infiltrated groups to gather information. Although this suspicion did not greatly affect her friendships, some people ridiculed her behind her back and accused her of fabricating information. As her sophomore year began, Brooke seemed to have found a compelling story that she really wanted to write for the paper. It all started back in the spring of 1997, when she first showed up on campus. Immediately, she shows the determination of an investigative journalist, trying to find out the truth about many stories. Perhaps overestimating their consequences, she expressed to her colleagues that she wanted to write a serious article, so she decided to learn about the fraternity, a group that only accepts elite members rich, smart, and influential. This made her very curious, because she knew that this fraternity kept a lot of secrets and had a great influence on student life. Brooke quickly realized that this fraternity was like any other in the student societies. To become a member, students first had to apply one as said. After that, the rest of the organization would review the application and get to know the student. At this stage, the student could either receive support or be rejected outright. After that, the checks began. A harmless mission from the members of the society can turn into a serious situation. Brooke heard that girls can be coerced into engaging in intimate behavior at the gathering. She believed that the victims were hiding the truth out of fear of the consequences. Already in the spring of 1997, Brooke came across several girls who had suffered at the hands of the fraternity members but were afraid to talk about it. She was on the side of the victims and wanted to help them. Even the professors were supportive of her pursuit, although some thought it was dangerous and advised her to be careful. Naturally, information about the ongoing investigation gradually reached the members of the fraternity, who began to look at Brooke with distrust and concern. Their attitude towards her worsened. It was curious that her neighbor, Jason, was a member of this very fraternity, and he knew everything that was going on there. For Brooke, and this was an exciting discovery, and she tried to get Jason to join her at the frat parties, knowing that this would be her best source of information. Brooke quickly learned that the fraternity's favorite day for parties was Thursday. They organized the biggest events that started in the evening and could last until the morning. In August 1997, Brooke decided to put her plans into action. She invited Shauna to join the group. In addition, there was a guy named Brian in the group. She met him a short time before these events. She didn't care about drinking or dancing, but mostly asked the partygoers questions like journalists and took notes for future articles. She was unaware that they had been closely watched the entire time. Several members of the fraternity were observing and listening to ensure that she did not go too far in her investigation. After this party, friends from Brooke's inner circle started receiving threatening notes. They all tried to warn her. All of this happened at a time when Brooke had gained sufficient independence. She told everyone who was worried about her that she could now move out of Jason's house and live separately. So she has nothing to fear. She found an apartment right across from the journalism department. At the same time, she received even more support from a married couple who were professors at the institution. However, after moving out, she still could not escape the direct threat. She tried to stay calm because her apartment belonged to a school security officer. At that time, the threats Brooke faced were not only verbal but also came through email. While visiting a friend, a group of men in a pickup truck showed up at the house and threatened her. When her parents found out, her mother urged her to stop the investigation. However, she was determined to continue. Members of the fraternity openly threatened her, saying she would face dire consequences if she didn't stop her inquiries. As the fall semester started in 1997, Brooke had moved into a new apartment, giving her a sense of relief. With just 1 year left at university, she planned to transfer to a school in New York. During this time, she mostly left her apartment only for social events and focused on writing articles to gain experience as a journalist. Brooke was deeply involved in investigating an incident involving a campus girl who claimed she had been assaulted and abused by a fraternity member. The victim agreed to an exclusive interview at the end of the second week of September. However, that meeting never took place. On September 7, 1997, the Indiana State Police received a call from Brooke's younger brother, Brown Baker. He told them in a trembling voice that he had found her injured body in her apartment. Braun often visited Brooke and had just spoken to one of her classmates, who complained about being unable to reach her. He promised to deliver some documents to her. When Braun arrived at her apartment and knocked, there was no response, but he heard noises inside. Using a spare key, he entered and found the apartment dark and quiet. Calling for her, he instead heard footsteps that suggested someone was fleeing. Assuming she was in the shower because of the sound of running water, he called out again but received no reply. When he noticed the bathroom door was slightly open, he went in to find a towel scattered on the floor but no sign of Brooke. He then entered her bedroom and discovered her lifeless body on the mattress, her eyes wide open and her expression frozen in fear. In shock, Braun immediately called the police, who then launched a murder investigation. Forensics determined that Brooke had been dead for some time based on the rigor mortis. They found no signs of forced entry. In the bathroom, investigators discovered a towel and a nearly empty bottle of bleach, both possibly used to clean the crime scene. A blood-stained knife was found under the sink, along with other bloody objects, possibly involved in the murder. The fatal wounds were to her chest, indicating that the attacker had used significant force. Signs of abuse were also present. DNA evidence and bloodstains from a struggle were collected. Brooke's body was sent for an autopsy while investigators began interviewing her friends and those close to her. Some friends, including her parents, wanted to see the scene for themselves, but police denied entry. During questioning, Braun mentioned Brooke's boyfriend, Steve Hoffman, who emerged as a primary suspect. Statistics indicated that many victims are killed by someone they know. Neighbors were interviewed, and the journalism department was shaken by the news. Many female students began avoiding going out in the evenings for fear of their safety, with pepper spray becoming a common item for protection. Detectives were reconstructing the events of September 6, 1997, a day when Brooke was particularly active. She visited several places both on and off campus and met Steve at 3:00 p.m. They spent several hours together, including time at a local fast food restaurant. By 7:00 p.m., another acquaintance, Biff Elite, had joined them. Biff was a friend of Brooke's, and they played softball together. They attended a small concert by a local band, which Brooke planned to write an article about. Later, around 9:00 p.m., Brooke arrived at a party where she encountered another acquaintance named Tommy. Tommy mentioned that they broke up after 10:30 p.m. However, by 12:30 a.m., Brooke was at another party and eventually left with someone named Brian Jones. Witnesses reported that Brooke was heading back to her apartment, marking the last sighting of her alive. The medical examiner noted that at least 19 hours had passed between her death and the time when Brian found her body. An autopsy revealed she had been brutally attacked, suffering numerous bruises and 13 stab wounds to her chest and back. With both lungs punctured, she had also been abused and strangled. The murder weapon, a steak knife, was found under the bathroom sink, and DNA testing indicated it contained blood and tissue matching Brooke. Despite testing biological fluids found on her body, there were no matches in the DNA database. Police questioned Steve, who denied having a serious relationship with Brooke, suggesting she might have been dating multiple people. His casual attitude towards their relationship raised suspicions about his involvement, potentially indicating a love triangle motive. However, he maintained a solid alibi. Detectives then approached Tommy, who voluntarily approached police to share what he knew, expressed concern, and admitted to having engaged in consensual intimacy with Brooke that evening. Tommy's situation was complicated by the lack of a solid alibi, as the first person to confirm his whereabouts didn't see him until after 3:00 a.m. He willingly provided a DNA sample. Brooke's mother shared insights about the security guard from whom Brooke rented her apartment. Initially, he seemed nice, but over time, she felt uneasy around him. After a few months, Brooke expressed fears that he wanted more than just a landlord-tenant relationship. At one point, he even suggested free rent in exchange for intimacy. Other women who had rented from the same landlord reported similar inappropriate proposals. Although he denied the allegations during police questioning and passed a polygraph test, he could not be ruled out due to the absence of a confirmed alibi. Detectives investigated about 100 potential suspects, mostly students, including fraternity members, but found no matches. Meanwhile, Brooke's family launched an activism campaign to raise safety awareness in Lawrence County. They shared photos of their daughter alongside images of other victims from previous years, leading to regular community meetings focused on local safety and law enforcement efforts. This increased public interest in the case, with many wanting to contribute to the investigation. One individual, named Deborah, came forward to report that Brooke had received threatening emails traced back to 2 fraternity members. However, DNA comparisons did not match those found on the attacker. There were also rumors concerning Brooke that were later revealed to be exaggerated. Brooke's drafts included hundreds of notes, and they were thoroughly reviewed by the police. They interviewed a girl who reported an abuse, but she was heavily intoxicated at the time. She later admitted that the intimacy was consensual. Detectives realized that Brooke might have fabricated the story for attention. They tested the DNA of hundreds of people, including fraternity members, but none matched the assailant's DNA. The investigation stalled as they interviewed over 500 individuals with no results. Despite this, Brooke's family held on to hope for clarity regarding their daughter's death. 2 years later, on July 5, 1999, police were called to an apartment just 7 blocks from Brooke's location after a neighbor reported suspicious sounds coming from Erica Norman's apartment. Erica, a university student born on November 13, 1977, was known for being athletic, participating in sports and the drama club. By 1999, at age 21, she had aspirations to move to Honduras to help others and advance her studies in languages, believing it would lead to greater opportunities. Upon arrival, the neighbor found the bathroom taps running, which he turned off to prevent flooding. Upon inspecting further, he discovered blood on the wall and immediately contacted the police. Officers found signs of a struggle, but Erica was missing. They noted similarities to Brooke's case from 2 years earlier and began investigating Erica's acquaintances to piece together the sequence of events. Erica was last seen on July 3 at a party, intending to leave early for rest. Brian Jones, the last person to see her, walked her home after working together at a local restaurant. Brian, a university student who had not graduated, claimed he visited Erica but left when she fell asleep during a movie. He cooperated with the police and did not seem suspicious. However, detectives delved deeper into his background. Suspecting a potential connection to Brooke's case, they uncovered that Brian had lived with Jason, a man linked to Brooke, in the fall of 1997, around the time of Brooke's murder. Notably, Brian left town soon after Brooke's body was discovered on September 7, 1997. Jason had submitted DNA samples, but Brian had not. This withdrawal raised further concerns, especially when it was revealed that Brian had been fired from his job on September 10, 1997. Due to multiple absences, Erica's body remained missing, but Brian continued to cooperate with investigators, even providing the clothes he wore on the night she disappeared. Small drops of blood were discovered on Brian's shoes. To confirm that the blood belonged to Erica, DNA testing was conducted using samples from her parents. Meanwhile, Brian's clothing, which he had given to the police, underwent a more detailed examination, yielding DNA evidence. 2 days later, the lab reported that this DNA was a 100% match to DNA found at the scene of Brooke Baker's 1997 murder, indicating that both Brooke and Erica were victims of the same killer. Additionally, Brian's DNA also matched. Consequently, on July 13, 1999, Brian Jones was arrested for the murder of 19-year-old Brooke Baker. He immediately refused to cooperate and requested a lawyer. The evidence collected made it easier to piece together what happened. However, Erica's body was still missing, which posed a significant challenge. The focus shifted back to the Brooke Baker family. Her parents were upset, and her mother was so aggressive that Brian had to be brought into the courthouse wearing a bulletproof vest. In response to the tense atmosphere, he confessed to killing Erica and indicated an approximate location for the police to search, but they were unable to find her. He maintained his innocence regarding Brooke's death and informed the judge that he intended to hire a lawyer. A week later, on July 20, a man from Illinois contacted the police after discovering remains in his cornfield. The body was decomposed, making identification difficult, but it was suspected to be Erica's. A wallet found nearby contained a driver's license with Erica's name, which helped the police in the identification process. Blood from her was discovered in Brian's car. In December 2000, he was charged with another murder. During Brooke Baker's trial, the defense attempted to argue that the intimate behavior was consensual. However, Brian's story continued to change, and ultimately, after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all counts. By this point, Brian Jones had already pleaded guilty to Erica's murder and received a 60-year sentence. Following the verdict for Brooks' murder, he was given an additional life sentence without the possibility of parole. After that, the campus killings ceased. The police officers entering the apartment were struck by a strong smell of antiseptic. Inside, they found the body of a young woman on the floor. She had been badly abused. Her head was shaved. Her face was bruised. She was missing teeth, and her skin has many burns. The surrounding room was suspiciously clean, suggesting this was not a natural death. All the evidence indicated a violent attack and a subsequent attempt to clean up the scene. This was the beginning of one of the most shocking criminal cases in Malaysia's recent history. A case where the victim remained invisible until the very end, and the offenders had long been seen as respected members of society. Etika Siti Nurashikin Mode, Sulong and Mohammed Ambre Yunus resided in a high-end residential area in Penampang, Kota Kinabalu, the capital of Sabah. Their house and appearance were unremarkable. They were perceived by their neighbors as a rich, polite, and caring family with 3 children. They often spoke about their twin sons, who had autism, presenting themselves as loving and devoted parents. In 2012, Etika became famous throughout Malaysia after reaching the finals of MasterChef Malaysia Season 2. People who watched the show liked her calm personality, confidence, friendly smile, and graceful behavior, which made her very popular. Even after the show was over, she stayed popular, and people continued to see her as a well-mannered, educated woman. Outside of television, she had an impressive professional background. She graduated from the University of Toronto with a degree in mining engineering and worked as an engineer for Petroleum Nasional Berhad, one of Malaysia's largest state-owned companies. This provided her with both a stable income and a respected standing in her field. Her husband, Mohammed, was a contractor who worked with the local government on construction and technical projects. In professional circles, he was considered reliable and efficient. Though not a public figure, he was known as a man of action whose business connections secured the family's comfortable lifestyle. They seemed like a stable, respectable, and ideal family. The mother was smart, the father was rich, and their sons were well cared for. They actively used social media to share happy family moments and participated in charity, especially supporting neurodiversity and young people with special needs. Their appearance convinced everyone, friends, neighbors, and online followers, that everything was fine. For a long time, this public image worked flawlessly, serving both as a shield against unwanted questions and as a way to build trust within the community. At the time, no one understood that a much more sinister truth lay hidden beneath the carefully constructed surface. Nur Afia Daeng Damin was born poor and immediately faced the challenges of being a woman forced to find work in another country. Like many Southeast Asian women who migrate for work, she left her rural home seeking a stable income and was prepared to accept difficult working conditions. However, her situation was especially complex. Even her nationality was uncertain. One source says Nur was from Bulukumba, a city on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. Her husband, Askari, told a British news source this. This idea is supported by claims that she was Bugis, an ethnic group present in both Indonesia and Malaysia, but conflicting details quickly surfaced. Indonesia's foreign ministry said they had no official proof she was an Indonesian citizen. Also, Malaysian documents related to the case didn't clear things up. Although the documents indicated she might be Malaysian, neither Indonesia nor Malaysia accepted responsibility for protecting her. This uncertain legal status created significant problems for her. Because she wasn't officially recognized as an Indonesian citizen, the Indonesian embassy wasn't required to help her. Furthermore, Malaysia didn't consider her a vulnerable migrant needing protection. Another reason Nur felt isolated was because she was far from her family. She lived an 8-hour drive away from her husband and had trouble communicating with him. People later said they hadn't been in contact for months. Furthermore, Her employers held her important documents, like her ID card. This prevented her from traveling or getting assistance. As a foreign domestic worker, Noor did not enjoy the rights and protections afforded to citizens, or even guests. This vulnerability significantly impacted her situation. At the time of the incident, Noor worked as a housekeeper for Atika and Mohammed. She lived in their apartment. She was the only adult in the apartment who was not related to the family. In Malaysia, domestic workers are tied to a single employer. Their visa and work permit are specifically linked to that employer, making it illegal to change jobs without the employer's permission. If a worker complains or leaves without consent, they risk losing their legal status and being deported. This system can leave workers vulnerable to abuse, as they have limited avenues for seeking help. Often, the workers' living and working conditions within the employer's home are not monitored or questioned by others. While officially employed by a seemingly reputable family, the worker may be isolated, unable to communicate freely, and lacking proper legal protection. Noor wasn't sent to the store or allowed to go out with the family's sons. Her being constantly at home became normal, and no one suspected anything wrong. On the 13th of December, 2021, Atika and Mohammed walked into the Kota Kinabalu police station. They claimed they had just returned from a trip and found their housekeeper unresponsive. From the very first minutes, officers on duty were uneasy about the couple's behavior. Their accounts sounded rehearsed, and their emotions appeared unnatural. They claimed they didn't see anything strange occurring in their house. They spoke of the victim as if they were a family member, voiced worry, and stated they desired to know what happened. The investigative team immediately went to the scene, but it didn't match Atika and Mohammed's story. The advanced state of decomposition indicated she had died days earlier, casting serious doubt on their version of events. Forensic experts estimated the death had occurred several days before their arrival at the station. Early lab results supported this timeline. Further suspicion arose when officers noted that the victim's head had been shaved and she was found without clothing. These circumstances couldn't be explained by natural causes or any genuine attempt at medical aid. More likely, they were deliberate actions meant to alter her appearance and conceal evidence. When questioned, both Atika and Mohammed rigidly stuck to the same phrasing, never deviating from their original script, which only heightened suspicion. Police initiated their arrest on suspicion of providing false statements and tampering with a potential crime scene. Forensic examination results showed that Noor Afia Dongdamin suffered 8 soft tissue injuries to her mouth, injuries to 6 incisors, including the left central incisor and left lateral incisor, showed signs of being clamped. The gums were lacerated, indicating that the injuries occurred close to the time of death. The pain level was described as 10 out of 10 due to the lack of local anesthesia. On the 20th of December, 2021, just 1 week after Atika and Mohammed arrest, the first phase of court proceedings began. The defense, however, filed a request for Atika to be released on bail. Her lawyers cited her role as a mother of 3 and unexpectedly presented a medical document claiming she had psycho-emotional conditions that, in their view, would worsen in detention. This document had not been part of the original case file, and no such information had previously been reported about her. The judge granted the request, setting bail at 30,000 Malaysian ringgit. Atika was released and returned home to live with her sons. The decision sparked public outrage. During the investigation, investigators found dozens of videos on the seized phones from Atika and Mohammed. They captured scenes from inside the family's apartment. None of the footage was from hidden cameras. Every clip had been recorded deliberately at close range by the people involved. The videos showed moments of physical aggression toward Noor, laughter, mocking remarks, and comments in the background suggested that what was happening was treated as entertainment. One of the first videos analyzed showed Noor standing against a wall, trying to shield herself from blows. In the background, a woman's laughter could be heard. Off-camera comments accompanied acts of physical force, slaps, shoves, and blows to her torso. In another clip, she was doused with boiling water. She cried out in pain while a voice off camera referred to it as another lesson. One of the most disturbing recordings showed a man using a tool resembling pliers to pull out her front teeth, without any pain relief. The recording captures sounds of pained cries and sobbing. The accompanying comments displayed no empathy. Instead, they suggested satisfaction with what was happening. The forensic medical review confirmed the authenticity of the recordings. Forensic dentist examined the injuries and documented the removal of 6 front teeth, along with bone damage and tears to the soft tissue inside the mouth. She stated that such injuries could only have been inflicted through the intentional, forceful use of a tool, alongside the physical aggression. The devices also contained clips in which the victim was placed in humiliating situations. Each act appeared premeditated, intentionally recorded. Officers involved in the initial viewing later reported that some of the material was so disturbing that they couldn't finish watching it. Several left the room before the review was complete. All video evidence was sent for full forensic examination. Investigators determined that all incidents took place inside the same apartment where Noor was later found. Some files were backed up to the cloud, implying they were saved as keepsakes. This digital collection was crucial evidence, proving to investigators that the abuse was not a tragic accident. Instead, it was a planned, ongoing pattern, deliberately recorded and stored, seemingly with satisfaction by the perpetrators. According to the forensic medical report, the period from the 8th of December to the 11th of December, 2021, marked a critical escalation of aggression inside the home. All injuries found on Noor's body indicated a significant increase in severity during those days. While earlier wounds showed different stages of healing, the injuries from the end of the first week of December were fresh, acute, and numerous. The forensic pathologist confirmed that during this period, Noor endured intense physical force. Using both blunt and hard objects, the blows targeted her head, face, chest, back, and limbs. The nature of these injuries ruled out accidental falls or self-inflicted harm, pointing instead to deliberate and systematic actions. Particularly large bruises on her shoulders and lower back suggested repeated forceful impact. Alongside the beatings, the same period brought burn injuries, thermal damage classified as 2nd and 3rd degree. Her shoulders, back, lower torso, and thighs were affected. According to the medical examiner, the skin in these areas was undergoing active tissue destruction, with portions beginning to die, leading to a diagnosis of necrotizing fasciitis. This condition develops when burn and trauma wounds provide an entry point for infection. Noor's body was overtaken by an aggressive bacterial process that destroyed soft tissue. The critical point came when the infection entered her bloodstream, triggering sepsis, a dangerous systemic reaction that can lead to organ failure. The medical review confirmed that her death was not instantaneous but the result of a slow physical decline, exacerbated by the complete lack of medical attention, isolated and denied treatment, or the ability to seek help. Noor spent her final days in mounting pain as the infection spread. Disinfectant was sprayed in the room to mask the stench. In October 2022, Mohammed's lawyers argued in court that the investigation against him was taking too long and that he hadn't been formally charged. The court agreed with these arguments and granted him bail. As a result, both suspects in a serious criminal case were back in the community less than a year after their arrests. The public reacted quickly and strongly. Social media was flooded with thousands of posts criticizing the justice system. People questioned whether the court was fair, suggesting the accused person's social status, reputation, and connections influenced the decision. In response, organizations advocating for the rights of migrant and domestic workers issued open letters to the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General's office. These letters highlighted the discriminatory nature of the case, where the victim had been denied civil protections while the accused benefited from substantial social influence. Media coverage included direct allegations of selective justice. This episode became a clear example of systemic vulnerability. The prosecution insisted on the immediate detention of the suspects, but legal maneuvering and the defense's strategic arguments delayed any punishment. After Atika and Mohammed were released, The case stalled. The investigation ended. No one was charged with homicide. Noor's family had no legal representation in Malaysia, making it very difficult for them to follow the case. Because Noor's citizenship was unconfirmed, she had no diplomatic protection. This lack of protection allowed Malaysian authorities to proceed slowly. Meanwhile, the defendant's family seemed to continue their lives as normal. Social media showed pictures of their sons, vacations, and everyday family activities. Although some information was made private, it appeared that their lives had not changed significantly. They could travel, I had access to resources, and were not under house arrest. Over time, public attention faded. News outlets shifted to other stories, and the case gradually disappeared from the headlines. Petitions and appeals that had once gathered tens of thousands of signatures stopped gaining momentum. This gave the accused a sense of security. Neither made any public apology or offered an explanation for what had happened. The case remained open until 2023. 18 months after Noor's death, the case went to trial, with Etika and Mohammed charged with premeditated murder. Their trial in the High Court of Sabah attracted considerable media and public interest. However, the trial was not broadcast live, and public access to documents was restricted. The trial focused on each defendant's role. Etika was portrayed as the instigator and leader, directing the events and physically assaulting Noor. Mohammed was accused of assisting in the crime, participating in specific events, and helping to cover up evidence after Noor's death. In court, both defendants remained composed. Etika refused to comment, stating only that she had no intention of killing anyone. Mohammed also refrained from making statements, but his facial expressions and demeanor betrayed no signs of remorse. The trial lasted several months. Public attention would spike each time local media published short summaries of the hearings. Civil society groups and human rights organizations continued to monitor the case, insisting on transparency and opposing any attempt to downgrade the charges. In July 2023, following a lengthy trial involving hearings, evidence review, and expert testimony, the judge announced the final verdict. Etika Siti Noora Shakeen Mohd Sulong was found guilty of premeditated murder committed with extreme cruelty. The court stated that her actions were planned, methodical, and intended to inflict the greatest possible suffering on Noor. Mohammed Ambre Yunus was found guilty of being an accomplice. The court concluded that he actively supported the crime and directly participated in the abuse, although Etika bore the primary responsibility. The judge stressed that Mohammed's involvement was significant. Both Etika and Mohammed were sentenced to death by hanging, the maximum punishment under Malaysian law for premeditated murder. The judge emphasized that their actions not only harmed Noor and her family, but also damaged confidence in the domestic employment system and the legal safeguards for vulnerable people. Following the sentencing, the defense announced plans to appeal. However, as of the end of 2023, the verdict remained in place. Advocacy groups observing the case expressed relief that justice had ultimately been served, despite the lengthy delays and attempts to influence the investigation. After the trial, a delicate issue arose: what to do with the body of Noor. Although she had died almost 2 years prior, her legal status was unclear. Following the autopsy, her body was stored in the morgue at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Kota Kinabalu. It remained there for over a year and a half, because no country requested its return. Her relatives in Indonesia could not afford to travel to Malaysia or arrange for the body's transportation due to financial and legal limitations. An advocacy group fighting to protect the rights of migrant workers launched a campaign to restore dignity to victims. They sent an open letter to the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Indonesian Embassy, urging authorities to ensure that the deceased would not be forgotten. Due to increased pressure from human rights organizations, Indonesian officials finally intervened. At the end of 2023, Noor Afia Dang Daman was officially recognized as an Indonesian citizen by descent. This decision was important for processing the necessary documents to move her remains and begin the repatriation process. After all, formalities were completed. Her body was handed over to consular representatives. In January 2024, Her remains were flown to Indonesia and buried in her mother's hometown. Although simple, the farewell ceremony had deep symbolic meaning. The ceremony ended the long and painful period when her body went unclaimed and unrested, prolonging the suffering of her loved ones. After the sentencing, a campaign was launched to remove the crime from public memory. Etika's relatives tried to maintain a positive image of her. They posted photos of her sons on social media, hinting at injustice, but never mentioning the details of the case. Some of Etika's former charitable projects were restarted with new names, but the same people involved. This allowed the family to continue gaining support without publicly discussing the trial or the victim. Many saw this as an attempt to improve their image in the media. Local media coverage of the case decreased significantly, and comments mentioning the crime were regularly removed from online platforms. Meanwhile, Mohammed and his family remained completely silent, only filing an appeal. The death sentences remain in place, but in Malaysia, their enforcement can take years. Officially, the case is over. In reality, it is simply paused. Noor's family has received no legal compensation, nor any official recognition of their rights. After years of appeals, a new development took place. On June 20, 2025, Etika Siti, Nura Shikin Mohd Sulong, 37, and Mohammed Ambre Yunus, 44, were sentenced to 34 years in prison for the murder of Indonesian domestic worker, Nur Afia Daeng Damin. With Mohammed receiving 12 strokes of the cane, the Nur Afia Daeng Damin case is a tragedy that exposes the disturbing underbelly of modern Malaysian society. Under the guise of a perfect family, Etika Siti, Nura Shikin Mohd Sulong and Mohammed Ambre Yunus caused the heartbreaking death of a vulnerable migrant worker who had no protection from the legal or social system. The 34-year prison sentence is a step towards justice, but it does not erase the pain of Nur Afia's family. Nur Afia's story is a warning of the precarious situation of millions of migrant domestic workers across Southeast Asia. Her ambiguous legal status, dependence on her employer, and lack of supervision pushed her into a cycle of abuse with no way out. The case has sparked heated debates about labor law reform, calling for better protections for migrant workers, including access to legal aid, monitoring of working conditions, and the removal of regulations that tie them to a single employer. The case has also highlighted the power of digital evidence in exposing crimes, but it has also raised questions about how easily societies can be fooled by the perfect images on social media. Etika and Mohammed's ideal family image masked a horrifying truth, leaving the community unaware of the signs until it was too late. Human rights organizations continue to call for transparency and accountability, ensuring that similar tragedies are not forgotten. While justice has been served, the journey to change is far from over, and efforts to reform the system have been slow. The Nur Afia Daeng Damin case is not just a story of a crime, but a call to action, to build a more just society, where the most vulnerable are protected and respected. Only when these changes become a reality can Nur Afia's tragedy find true meaning, ensuring that she is not forgotten and that her story will spur a better future. In April 2021, Deanne Warner, a successful businesswoman and mother of 5, suddenly disappeared after sending a strange text message. That short message became a big question mark, causing her family and the police to have headaches for many years. There was no more phone call, no bank transaction, or any trace that Dee was still alive. More than 1,200 days later, the chilling truth was finally revealed. Dee's body was found in a sealed tank, right on the family's farm. So, who killed her? Why was this secret hidden for so long? And what was behind that haunting final message? Let's explore the whole shocking story. On Saturday, the 24th of April, 2021, Deanne Warner, age 52, woke up with a difficult decision weighing on her. After 15 years of marriage, she had decided to tell her husband it was over. Her family had lived in Lenawee County, Michigan, for 5 generations, where she grew up in a tight-knit farming community. However, she now felt trapped by the rural life that once comforted her. Born in 1968, Dee had always displayed an entrepreneurial spirit that set her apart. She had built DDW Investments LLC from the ground up, creating a thriving trucking company that operated from the barns in her backyard. Her success had earned her respect throughout the community, where she was known for her infectious smile and generous heart. On that Saturday, Dee had an appointment to get her eyelashes done. At the salon, the esthetician noticed that Dee was crying, and her eyes were puffy and swollen, so they had to reschedule to another day. She was upset because of an argument with her husband, Dale John Warner. Despite being emotional, Dee scheduled another appointment for the following week. That day, Dee visited her older children. She saw her daughter, Amber, and then spent the late morning with her son, Zach. At Amber's house, Zach noticed right away that Dee was upset and had been crying. Later, Dee took her youngest daughter, 9, to a soccer game, trying to act normal, despite her distress. While she seemed like any other cheering parent, she was inwardly bracing herself for a difficult situation. Earlier that Saturday, Dee told her daughter Rickle that she was afraid of her husband. That same day, Dee told several people, including her adult children, that she wanted a divorce. She texted her son Zach, saying she was done with this and would give him her share of the businesses. But Dee's day was about to get much worse. That evening, she had a tense argument with her husband, Dale, and their employee, Nank, about the trucking business. The argument focused on how the business was run and its finances. Dee felt that Nank was betraying her. While Dale consistently took Nank's side, Nank had worked for the businesses since the mid-2000s and had eventually become the manager of the trucking operations. Dee suspected that Nank was working against her, making decisions without her knowledge, and weakening her control over her own company. At 8:34 p.m., Dee sent her 9-year-old daughter, Angelina, to a friend's house for the weekend, wanting to shield her from the upcoming argument. As evening arrived at the Warner residence, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Dee had spent the entire day bracing herself for this confrontation, but she couldn't have fully anticipated what was about to happen. Dale Warner, a 56-year-old man, was used to being in charge. Throughout their 15-year marriage, he had cut Dee off from her friends and family, and kept tabs on her constantly. He had put trackers on her car, insisted on seeing her phone, used threats and violence to control her. The argument that night was different from any they'd had before. Dale later told investigators that they argued about money and cheating, calling it the worst fight of his life. Earlier that day, Dee exchanged text messages with her business manager, Suzanne Wilhelm, regarding problems with Nank. Suzanne later testified that, in their text conversation about Nank and Dale, Dee said she was hyperventilating and vomiting. Dee also told Suzanne that she wanted to sell all of their assets. This conversation showed how desperate Dee was. She was considering not only leaving Dale, but also selling everything they owned together to start fresh. For Dale, who considered his wife as property instead of an equal partner, this was the ultimate betrayal. At 10:24 p.m., Dee's friend texted her to check in. Dee didn't respond for 29 long minutes. Finally, at 10:53 p.m., she replied with only one emotionless letter. Private investigator Billy Little, who later assisted Dee's family, understood the importance of Dee's text message. He said Dee was usually very communicative and texted often, but she never used the single letter K in her replies. This message troubled investigators for a long time because it was so unlike Dee that her family instantly knew something was seriously wrong. Unfortunately, by that point, it was too late. According to Dale's version of events, a story that would change multiple times over the coming months, he and Dee somehow reconciled by the end of the night. He claimed that Dee fell asleep on the living room floor while he was giving her a massage for her chronically sore neck. and that he then carried her to the couch before going to bed himself. But investigators would later discover that this story was just the first of many lies Dale would tell about that night. Looking back, the warning signs had been there all along. Dale said that on Sunday, the 25th of April, 2021, Dale left for work at 6:30 a.m. Dee was asleep on the couch, snoring. Investigators later found that this detail, among others in Dale's story, didn't quite add up. That day, around 9 a.m., Dee's adult daughter, Rachel, arrived at the family farm with her boyfriend and young daughter for their usual Sunday breakfast. They had been doing this every week for years, enjoying a meal together as a family. However, when they knocked, no one answered. They called for Dee, but the house was silent. This was unusual because Dee never missed their Sunday breakfasts and always answered the door when Raquel arrived. When Raquel finally tracked down Dale, what happened next would chill her to the bone. Dale approached her, holding something that shouldn't have been in his possession, Dee's $50,000 wedding ring, a symbol of their marriage that Dee wore every single day. Dale claimed he had found the ring on his desk in the office, explaining that Dee had left it there before she disappeared. But Raquel knew her mother would never remove that ring, especially not if she was simply going away for a few days. When people asked where Dee was, Dale claimed she had left with a travel bag, purse, in phone, curling iron, and hairspray. He implied she might be with another man or even leaving the country. However, this story didn't make sense because both of Dee's cars were still there, one in the garage at home and another at her office nearby. How could she have left without a car? More disturbing was what Dale told investigators about Dee's supposed escape plan. He claimed she had a secret phone that she used for clandestine activities. Deputy Hall captured Dale's exact words on body cam footage. This was a classic tactic used by abusers, projecting their own secretive and controlling behavior onto their victims. Dale had been tracking Dee's movements and monitoring her communications for years. But now he was suggesting that she was the one with secrets. Later that morning, when Zach and Raquel came to the property looking for their mother, Dale's behavior then became more suspicious. Security cameras showed Zach searching Dee's office, the building, and the grounds. Dale remained surprisingly calm considering his wife had disappeared. After that Sunday morning, every electronic record of Dee Warner vanished. It was as if she never existed. Her phone records showed no calls made or received. Her bank accounts remained unused. Her social media accounts were inactive. There was no sign she had used her credit cards, contacted anyone, or logged into her online accounts. Dee's cell phone switched from Wi-Fi to cellular data around 11 p.m. on the 24th of April, and then completely shut off at 2:30 a.m. on the 25th of April. After that, there was no activity whatsoever. This sudden silence was especially noticeable because she was always in contact with her business and family. To understand what happened to Dee Warner, one needs to understand the life she was desperately trying to escape. This wasn't just a marriage gone wrong. It was a carefully constructed prison that had taken years to build. Raquel would later testify in court that her mother was trapped in an extremely toxic relationship with Dale Warner. She described a household filled with constant tension, with frequent yelling, cursing, and slamming of objects. Dale's abuse wasn't just limited to yelling and slamming doors. He reportedly stalked Dee in person and online. He is said to have put tracking devices on her car and demanded to see her private messages. Raquel testified that her mother showed her the tracking device Dale had put on her car. Beyond physical control, Dale also manipulated Dee psychologically. He made her believe she needed him to survive, that her business depended on him, and that she would lose everything if she left. In December 2020, 4 months before she disappeared, Dee tried to leave Dale. She told a friend that when she attempted to leave, Dale insulted her and threw her into a dresser. Dee also told her friend that Dale had become the devil and wouldn't let her take their daughter, Angelina, if she left. Dee finished by saying she genuinely thought Dale could kill her. The physical violence was happening more often and was becoming more serious. Around November or December 2020, Dee showed her business manager, Suzanne Wilhelm. A concerning injury, a large bump on her forehead, which Suzanne described as about the size of a quarter. Dee's hair hid the injury somewhat. About 5 months before this, Dee had told Suzanne something that now seems to predict the future. She didn't want to leave Angelina alone with Dale. Even at that time, Dee felt that her husband was dangerous, but she felt stuck because of their custody agreement and because she depended on the family businesses for money. Dale controlled every part of Dee's life. He watched where she went, checked her messages, and tried to keep her away from her children from her previous marriage. He always wanted to know her location and got upset when she spent time with family or friends without him. Suzanne later said that Dee appeared uneasy when Dale massaged her neck and shoulders, particularly after they argued. This becomes very important when Dale said Dee fell asleep while he was massaging her neck the night she vanished. Dale had also allegedly asked a farm employee to buy a GPS tracker for Dee's car and to install surveillance cameras around their property. He asked another employee to clone the contents of Dee's phone, giving him access to her private messages and communications. The financial control was equally devastating. Despite Dee being the primary owner of DDW Investments and the driving force behind their business success, Dale had systematically gained access to their joint accounts and business operations. He was spending money at an alarming rate, while Dee worked multiple jobs to keep their ventures profitable. But perhaps most telling was Dale's reaction to Dee's previous attempt to leave. According to court documents, Dale had told Dee that he had already been through one divorce and did not want to go through another one. This wasn't the sentiment of a man hoping to save his marriage. It was the threat of someone who viewed divorce as an unacceptable option. Dale also told police that Dee had been upset the night before, suffering from a migraine after an argument with employees. But the most disturbing aspect of Dale's conversation with Deputy Hall was his lack of concern. There was no urgency in his voice, no desperate pleas to help find his missing wife, and no emotional breakdown at the thought of losing the woman he claimed to love. Instead, Dale seemed more focused on explaining why Dee's disappearance was normal and predictable. When Dee's brother, Greg Hardy, directly asked Dale what had happened to his sister, Dale's response was disturbingly matter-of-fact. In the days and weeks following Dee's disappearance, Dale's actions raised serious suspicions. Instead of helping the police or hiring his own investigators to find his wife, Dale seemed more concerned with protecting himself legally. The day after Dee vanished, Dale secretly changed the password to the property's security system. This suggested he had something to hide, as an innocent person would likely want to provide full access to any footage that could help find Dee. Furthermore, instead of organizing searches or offering rewards, Dale spent that same day looking for a lawyer. These details painted a disturbing picture. As the months went by and Dee remained missing, investigators started to unravel a complicated scheme of financial crimes and lies, making Dale Warner look more and more suspicious. They found that he had been systematically stealing from Dee's company, DDW Investments, which she had built from the ground up, while also trying to get rid of her. A family friend and spokesperson revealed that Dale had been taking equipment, money, and trucks from DDW Investments. He was moving these assets to a new company he started, leaving Dee's original business with growing debts and fewer resources. Private investigator Billy Little, hired by Dee's family in March 2022, uncovered the extent of Dale's financial manipulation. Dale apparently used a fake power of attorney from 2014 to transfer almost all of DDW Investments' assets to a new company, DDW Transportation LLC. This happened in August 2021. Only 4 months after Dee disappeared, Little emphasized that this transfer was highly suspicious. Even selling a car with joint ownership requires both signatures. Yet, Dale managed to separate and transfer a multi-million-dollar business without Dee's knowledge or permission. Even though she owned half the company, the timing strongly suggests a motive. By this point, it seemed likely Dee wouldn't return, and Dale needed to take control of the business before her disappearance raised questions. Dale's actions became even more suspicious when he sold DDW Transportation to Laidlaw Carriers Bulk in 2022. This sale earned him a large sum of money, But instead of giving the proceeds to Dee's estate or her children, Dale kept it all for himself. He essentially took control of his missing wife's company and sold it for his own personal gain. Furthermore, the employee who had argued with Dee on her last day also profited from this deal. After Dale sold the trucking business to Laidlaw, Nank was quickly hired by Laidlaw as a finance employee. This was likely not a coincidence, but rather a reward for Nank's assistance in Dale's plan. However, Nank's involvement was more significant than initially suspected. Little's investigation showed that on the 25th of April, 2021, at 3:30 a.m., mere hours after Dee disappeared, Nank logged into the company system using a fake name and removed lime from the Warner farm. He then transported the lime to Burns Harbor, Indiana, and continued another 50 miles to a Chicago wastewater plant to collect compost. This early morning activity raised serious questions. Why would Nank access the farm at 3:30 a.m. so soon after Dee's disappearance? And why did he use a false name to record his actions? Little obtained recordings of Nank speaking to his massage therapist about his involvement in the case. In these recordings, Nank admitted he was deeply involved in the Dee Warner case. The financial discoveries extended beyond the business assets. Dee's son, Zach, testified that he had tried to access an electronic safe at Dale and Dee's home before her disappearance, but the combination he normally used was no longer working. When he used a backup key to open the safe, he discovered that a substantial amount of money Dee had stored there was missing. Only Zach and Dee knew the combination and had access to the backup key. Even more revealing was Dale's behavior regarding property division after Dee's disappearance. Little discovered that Dale was attempting to split off a piece of property where Nank lived, despite the fact that this required approval from Dee, who owned 50% of the Warner farming operation. Little questioned this decision. How could Dale divide the land without the approval of Dee Warner? The answer was simple. Dale was operating under the assumption that Dee would never be able to object to his decisions. The property where Nank lived had been sold to him under a land contract, but he was nearly $50,000 behind on his payments. Every new lead seemed to pull them deeper into a nightmare of greed, betrayal, and murder. After 20 months of intensive investigation involving hundreds of hours of detective work by Michigan State Police and Lenawee County prosecutors, authorities finally had enough evidence to act. The breakthrough came not from a confession or a witness, but from the methodical accumulation of circumstantial evidence that painted an undeniable picture of guilt. On the 21st of November, 2023, Michigan State Police announced that they had made an arrest in connection with Dee Warner's murder. Dale John Warner, 53, was taken into custody at his home without incident, charged with open murder and tampering with evidence. At his arraignment on the 22nd of November, 2023, Dale appeared in Lenawee County's 2-Ampere District Court to face the charges against him. When asked how he pleaded to the charges of open murder and tampering with evidence, Dale responded firmly, "Not guilty." The prosecution requested a bond of $20 million, arguing that Dale posed a significant flight risk and danger to the community. Dale's defense attorney requested that he be released on a reasonable bond, but judge denied the request. Dale was ordered held without bond pending trial. The arrest validated what Dee's family had believed from the beginning, that Dale was responsible for her disappearance and death, but it also meant confronting the reality that Dee was never coming home alive. For more than 3 years, Dee Warner's body had been hidden in the most obvious place imaginable, right under the noses of investigators, family members, and the community that had been searching for her. The location was so audacious, so brazen in its simplicity, that it had taken over 1,200 days to discover. On the 17th of August, 2024, Michigan State Police executed a search warrant on Dale Warner's property on Paragon Road in Tipton, approximately 4 miles from the home where Dee had lived. This wasn't the first time law enforcement had searched Warner properties, but new evidence and refined investigative techniques had pointed them toward a specific location. Hidden inside a barn on the property was an anhydrous ammonia tank, a large metal container typically used for storing fertilizer chemicals for agricultural operations. But this tank contained no ammonia. Instead, investigators discovered that the tank had been resealed and repainted to conceal its contents. When they opened the tub, they found the remains of a woman. On the 22nd of August, 2024, the Jackson County Medical Examiner positively identified the remains as Dee Warner through dental records. Leaving no doubt, after more than 3 years of uncertainty, Dee had finally been found. The medical examiner officially ruled Dee's death a homicide, though the specific manner of death was withheld. Pending further investigation, the discovery was both a relief and a new source of anguish for Dee's family. But it also raised new questions about the cruelty of Dale's actions. With Dee's body recovered, prosecutors began building their case for trial. The case took another disturbing turn in March 2025, when authorities arrested Dale's son, Jaron Dale Warner, on charges of evidence tampering and accessory to murder in connection with Dee's death. While the charges were later dismissed, the arrest suggested that the cover-up may have involved multiple family members. Prosecutors alleged that the conspiracy to conceal Dee's murder extended beyond just Dale himself. The involvement of other family members and employees suggests a network of complicity that allowed the crime to remain hidden for over 3 years. In May 2025, Dee's family filed a $100 million wrongful death lawsuit against Dale, providing the most detailed account yet of what they believed happened on the night of the 24th of April, 2021. The lawsuit alleges that Dale fatally strangled his wife in their home, then transported her body to the anhydrous ammonia tank, where he welded her inside and repainted the container to conceal his crime. The filing details the systematic pattern of abuse that preceded Dee's murder, painting a picture of a man who viewed his wife as property that he could dispose of at will. During Dale's preliminary hearing, judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial. Dale's defense attorney has argued that the prosecution's case relies primarily on circumstantial evidence and that there are alternative explanations for the evidence against Dale. She requested a change of venue, arguing that pre-trial publicity has made it impossible to find an impartial jury in Lenawee County. However, in August 2025, judge denied the change of venue motion, ruling that while there had been significant media coverage of the case, she was confident that 12 impartial jurors could be found. The trial was rescheduled to begin in January 2026. The truth was about to come out, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. However, Dee Warner can rest in peace, knowing that her story has been told, her killer has been caught, and her family will never stop fighting to ensure that other women don't suffer the same fate. Betrayal doesn't come overnight. It creeps in through little lies, fleeting glances, and gradually turns jealousy into obsession. Obsession into a desire for control. Love then becomes manipulation, and the line between loyalty and destruction is blurred. By September 2023, it all explodes into a nightmare that shakes the entire community. 4 members of an innocent family are murdered, but the truth that follows is even more terrifying. A sick psychological game where every action is choreographed, and every life is just a pawn on a deadly chessboard. Behind it all is not a gang or a criminal force, but a twisted love affair, ending in blood and horror. Watch until the end, because this story will show how a seemingly harmless love affair turns into a nightmare no one could have imagined. Nathaniel Huey Jr. was born around 1993 in one of the most troubled neighborhoods of Chicago, echoing the chaos of his early life. He grew up in an environment where aggression and crime were everyday realities. From a young age, he showed signs of impulsivity and a lack of self-control. In school, he often got into fights, clashed with teachers, and showed little interest in learning. The first time he got into trouble with the law was as a teenager, when he was arrested for participating in a robbery. However, due to his young age, he did not receive a serious sentence. He quickly realized that the world of crime was not only exciting but also profitable. which led him to delve into more serious crimes. In 2016, Nathaniel was arrested for assault, and the following year, he was apprehended again for driving under the influence. However, his true fascination lay with firearms. He collected weapons and showcased them on social media, posting pictures of handguns, rifles, and ammunition. This behavior eventually drew the attention of law enforcement, resulting in a court ruling that prohibited him from owning any firearms. Yet, he ignored this restriction and continued to acquire weapons illegally. Despite his ongoing legal troubles, he attempted to start a business by launching a private security company, which was entirely illegitimate as he had no license and was barred from carrying a firearm. Nonetheless, he aggressively advertised his services online, sharing images of himself in body armor and holding weapons. Ermelinda Palomo was born on the 3rd of February, 1973. By the time she met Nathaniel, she was an independent woman, a mother of 5, and already a grandmother. In contrast to Nathaniel's chaotic upbringing, Ermelinda grew up in a stable family. Though her personal life had its complexities, after marrying young and getting divorced, she raised her children and took care of her grandchildren by herself, yearning to find happiness for herself. Known for her strong personality, Ermelinda commanded respect from her family. Although some found her overly strict, she liked to be in control and expected complete loyalty from those closest to her. When Nathaniel entered her life, their connection puzzled many. He was 20 years younger, had a troubled past, and a volatile temperament. Their relationship developed quickly, starting with a chance meeting through mutual acquaintances. Initially, Ermelinda dismissed Nathaniel, but his confidence, persistence, and charm eventually won her over. For Nathaniel, Ermelinda offered a sense of security, providing shelter and emotional support. For Ermelinda, it was a new experience that made her feel empowered, as though she were guiding this younger man. Their unusual bond brought together two people with starkly different backgrounds. They moved in together, and soon Ermelinda's children and grandchildren were living under the same roof. Although the house became crowded, it lacked warmth and harmony. Rose, as neighbors began to notice the lack of peace in their relationship. Nathaniel's short temper clashed with Ermelinda's need for control, creating a volatile atmosphere. Nathaniel was determined to maintain his weapon collection. Despite legal restrictions, he continued to acquire handguns and rifles from illegal sources, making shady deals and exploiting loopholes. He took pride in his growing arsenal and enjoyed discussing firearms at length, often spending hours talking about calibers and modifications. What began as a mere interest evolved into an integral part of his daily life. He carried a handgun even at home, frequently disassembling and reassembling it at the kitchen table. His weapons were always in plain sight, causing those around him to feel increasingly uneasy. Initially, Ermelinda chose not to get involved in Nathaniel's activities as long as he brought money home. She ignored the fact that his business was illegal and didn't ask questions. However, over time, she started to notice that it wasn't only about the money. Nathaniel was becoming increasingly unstable. He gets easily angered when things don't go his way, sometimes just because of small matters like the gaze of others or the moment someone speaks. His outbursts would happen suddenly, but he would quickly return to normal, acting as if nothing had occurred. Christina, one of Ermelinda's daughters, was the first to voice her concerns. She recognized what others tended to overlook. Nathaniel was not just difficult, he was potentially dangerous. Christina never trusted him and noticed how he often spoke about aggression, carried himself as if he was better than everyone else, and couldn't handle being contradicted. What alarmed her the most was how easily he could become aggressive. During one argument, he clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles turned white, and she knew that if she didn't stop him, he would one day cross the line. The tension in the household continued to rise, although no one explicitly talked about it. The fear of Nathaniel was growing increasingly difficult to ignore. By 2021, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had been together for 6 years. Their relationship appeared stable on the surface, but it had long lost its foundation. Nathaniel was never committed to one woman, and his infidelities had become routine. He initiated relationships through social media, quickly moved on from one to the next, and engaged in secret conversations daily. He frequently left the house late at night, claiming it was for work-related meetings or personal reasons. Ermelinda often found herself awake in the middle of the night, realizing he was gone again, only for him to return in the early morning without any explanations. Nathaniel believed he was invulnerable and thought Ermelinda either wouldn't discover his actions or wouldn't confront him, but he underestimated her resilience. At first, Ermelinda dismissed his behavioral changes, but she soon realized how often he was absent, how much he was texting someone, and his sudden focus on his appearance. While she didn't immediately connect the dots, her suspicions grew. Her breaking point came when she saw a message on his phone. It suggested a recent meeting, confirming her worst fears. However, instead of confronting him right away, she opted to gather more evidence, observing him closely, checking his messages, and scrutinizing his habits. She learned to recognize when he was lying or trying to hide something, and when he was sneaking off to see someone else. Ermelinda was not the type to forgive betrayal easily. She couldn't simply accept the situation or walk away without taking action. She didn't want to create a dramatic scene, but she also wouldn't let Nathaniel escape unscathed. With each new piece of evidence she uncovered, her anger intensified. She faced two choices: leave and cut him off completely, or make him regret his decisions. The more she contemplated, the clearer it became. She wasn't going to be just another woman he discarded. She was determined not to act rashly. She knew a direct confrontation could spiral out of control. Instead, she decided on a more calculated approach. Rather than a fierce argument, she began plotting a subtler form of revenge, a plan to make his life unbearable, putting him in a vulnerable position. Although she hadn't finalized her next move, she was certain of one thing: her silence was merely the calm before the impending storm. After months of careful planning, Ermelinda began to execute her scheme. The first step was to create fake accounts on various platforms. She created multiple accounts using random photos of people and chose believable names. Some accounts were made to represent mysterious women, while others portrayed dangerous individuals with dubious backgrounds. Ermelinda learned about how online scams worked, mastering the techniques of deception and manipulation of people's beliefs. She constructed a detailed network where each fake persona played a specific role. One could be seductive, another, a source of dangerous information, and a third, an anonymous threat. Together, these personas aimed to instill paranoia in Nathaniel, making him feel like he was entangled in a perilous game. To make her plan more convincing, Ermelinda researched criminal networks. She studied underground organizations, intimidation tactics, threat language, and psychological manipulation. She read about the mafia, cartels, and illegal money flows, examining their hierarchies and communication styles while trying to imitate their messaging. Her most effective tool, however, was her ability to control information. By using specialized software and hidden features on social media, she learned to track people's locations, access their contacts, and monitor conversations. Before long, she had enough knowledge to trick Nathaniel. With her plan set, Ermelinda initiated contact with Nathaniel through one of her fake accounts. The persona she created was a mysterious woman who seemed genuinely interested in him. Nathaniel, accustomed to online interactions, didn't suspect anything and quickly responded. However, unlike his usual experiences, this conversation took an unexpected turn. After a few days of casual chatting, Ermelinda, disguised as her fictitious character, began dropping hints about his past, making him uncomfortable with specific details. She then escalated the psychological manipulation by sending him a message with his real-time location. This initial scare was just the beginning, but it was enough to make Nathaniel uneasy. Ermelinda had achieved her first success. He was frightened, and she was just getting started. Seeing that Nathaniel was growing nervous, Ermelinda intensified her strategy. By creating even more fake accounts, Now, he's not just being contacted by a stranger. He's surrounded by dangerous characters. From Bulgarian mafia members to cartel enforcers and assassins, each had their own story, motives, and demands. Messages flooded in from different numbers and platforms. Some contained threats, others offered protection, while a few posed strange ultimatums. One insinuated that his survival depended on completing simple tasks. Another claimed he was ensnared in something much larger with no escape. Nathaniel struggled to grasp the situation, but it all felt alarmingly real. As a result, his behavior changed significantly. He constantly looked over his shoulder, avoided calls from unknown numbers, and checked for signs of being followed. At times, he even asked Ermelinda to drive him to safer locations. To evade potential tracking, Ed deleted messages, changed passwords, and attempted to confuse his pursuers, but each action only deepened his paranoia. Ermelinda could see how fear was consuming him, and her plan was succeeding. Nathaniel became fixated on battling a threat that wasn't real, while the true danger loomed closer than he imagined. In May 2023, a new woman named Zoraida Bartolome entered Nathaniel's life when they met at his new job. Initially, their interactions were ordinary, but soon they developed an interest in each other. Zoraida was married with 2 children, but her home life did not bring her happiness. She had a history of infidelity, and meeting Nathaniel was just another instance of that pattern. She did not consider it a moral issue. Instead, she believed her personal happiness took precedence over societal expectations. Nathaniel, too, was unaware of the consequences. His relationship with Ermelinda had lost its significance, and his affair with Zoraida provided the excitement he craved. Nathaniel and Zoraida's relationship began with subtle glances and hints, quickly evolving into constant communication. Ermelinda had been monitoring Nathaniel for a while and noticed his growing connection with Zoraida. Initially, she dismissed it, as Nathaniel's brief romances were nothing new to her. However, she soon realized this relationship was different. His messages to Zoraida shifted from light banter to declarations of love and dreams of a future together. As she read their messages, Ermelinda felt humiliated. All her intricate schemes to control Nathaniel had failed. Despite her efforts to instill fear in him, he was living his life and seemed unaware of her manipulations. This perceived betrayal felt like a direct insult to her power. Ermelinda decided she could no longer be passive. It was time for her to retaliate. She intensified her psychological tactics, introducing new, more threatening elements. She fabricated mafia threats, telling Nathaniel he was in serious danger and needed to end things with Zoraida immediately. However, Nathaniel was undeterred. After enduring months of fear, he felt numb and was now more committed to Zoraida than ever. For the first time, he wasn't just concealing his affair, he was fighting for it. Ermelinda shifted her strategy. She realized that in order to bring Nathaniel down, she couldn't just target him, but also had to put pressure on Zoraida. First, she began by instilling fear in Alberto, Zoraida's husband. Using fake accounts, she sent cryptic messages that hinted at Zoraida's infidelity, along with suspicious photos. When that failed to create the desired effect, she resorted to direct threats. Alberto received anonymous letters warning him that his family was in danger and that harm could come to his loved ones. Ermelinda knew this fear would drive him to act. Initially, Alberto tried to disregard the threats, but soon anxiety took over. He had no idea who was behind it, but it was clear the issue extended beyond marital troubles. Ermelinda had succeeded. Tension was rising in Zoraida's home, and fear influenced their choices. However, Nathaniel was not completely devastated yet. Despite the anxious thoughts that Ermelinda stirred up and the pressure from fabricated criminal organizations, he remained steadfast by Zoraida's side. Ermelinda saw an opportunity to exploit his trust. She revealed that she was aware of Zoraida and began to spin a new narrative, convincing Nathaniel that Zoraida was not who she claimed to be. Ermelinda persuaded Nathaniel that Zoraida was actually involved with the mafia. She fabricated enough credible information to make him believe this lie. She sent him messages from various informants suggesting that Zoraida had been manipulating him and that Zoraida's presence in his life was suspicious. She crafted this deception meticulously, leading Nathaniel to believe he had no choice but to accept it. He began to connect various dots. This explained the Mafia's knowledge about him, the surveillance he faced, and Zoraida's lack of fear regarding the threats. Ermelinda did not stop there. She demanded proof of Nathaniel's loyalty. He needed to demonstrate that he would not betray those who had supposedly saved him from danger. Conversations about handling Zoraida and her family began to take a more direct turn. The message was clear. There was no other choice. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Nathaniel finally acquiesced to Ermelinda's control. He no longer questioned the reality of the situation. Ermelinda had won. He was willing to do whatever it took to prove his loyalty, believing there was no fear or regret in fulfilling what he thought was a necessary task. He started planning the crime with the same meticulousness he had once applied to his illicit business. The first step was to surveil Zoraida. He studied her schedule, noting when she was home and who was with her. He paid special attention to times when her husband and family might be in danger. Nathaniel carefully studied the entrances of the house, planned escape routes, and spent days monitoring Zoraida's movements to memorize every detail. Simultaneously, he collected supplies. Although he already had some weapons, he required additional items, such as new clothes, gloves, bags, tape, and a flashlight. He went shopping with Ermelinda, who stayed in the background to avoid raising suspicion. They approached each step as if they were preparing for a critical mission, with Ermelinda acting as his advisor, guiding Nathaniel and reinforcing his belief that he had to execute the plan flawlessly. She convinced him that this was the only option available. By the time he was prepared, he had stopped contemplating the consequences and thought he was simply doing what was necessary. The decision was made. All that remained was to act. On the designated night of September 16, 2023, their plan was set to unfold. Ermelinda appeared calm, as if unaware of what was happening. Later that night, they drove to Zoraida's house. With Ermelinda driving nonchalantly like it was an ordinary errand, she inquired a few times about the purpose of their visit, but Nathaniel didn't respond. His focus was solely on his objective. Upon arrival, Ermelinda remained in the car while Nathaniel got out and approached the house, expecting the front door to be locked. He broke a window in the backyard and slipped inside. The noise startled Alberto, who woke up and went to investigate. At that moment, Nathaniel fired, but missed. Alberto quickly understood that this was not a typical burglary. He turned and rushed towards the hallway, trying to reach his family's room for safety. However, Nathaniel caught up to him in the hallway. A few gunshots followed, and Alberto fell to the floor before he could reach the door. The house then fell silent, except for Nathaniel's heavy breathing. Hearing the gunfire, Zoraida barricaded herself in her bedroom with her family. Unsure who was attacking them, Nathaniel attempted to force the bedroom door open, but it wouldn't budge. He took aim at the lock and shot it, the bullet striking Zoraida and causing her to stop moving. He then shot and killed her two children, Adriel, 9, and Diego, 7. Killing them instantly, the door swung open, and silence enveloped the room. Neighbors only heard muffled sounds. It was all over in a matter of minutes. Nathaniel inspected the house, tossing furniture around to simulate a robbery, and creating the appearance of a struggle. Afterwards, he returned to the car where Ermelinda waited. She didn't ask about the outcome. They simply drove away, leaving devastation behind. For a moment, silence hung over Zoraida's home, but it didn't last. Alarmed neighbors, disturbed by the gunfire and broken glass, quickly called the authorities. Reporting the incident around 4:00 a.m., officers arrived within minutes. Upon entering, they noticed signs of forced entry, and it was evident that this was a deliberate crime rather than a random act of violence. Nathaniel's first mistake was not creating a convincing enough fake of the robbery. Although items were scattered, nothing of value was missing. indicating a planned attack rather than a burglary. The disarray did little to convince investigators that theft was the motive. More critically, it didn't take long for the police to link the crime to someone with a strong motive. By morning, detectives had begun to investigate Zoraida's personal connections. Many at work knew about her affair with Nathaniel, with colleagues describing their relationship as more than just casual. They had discussed a future together. And soon, Nathaniel's name became central to the investigation. As detectives delved into Nathaniel's background, they uncovered a lengthy record of offenses, illegal activities, and a significant obsession with weapons. The evidence overwhelmingly pointed to him. While the police collected information, Ermelinda continued her manipulation. She messaged Nathaniel, pretending to be part of the mafia, assuring him that everything was going according to plan. She created a false sense of security, convincing him that as long as he followed her directions, he would be safe. She made sure he believed that the authorities would never be able to prove his involvement. The investigation advanced quickly, and detectives started looking into Nathaniel's recent activities, uncovering several inconsistencies. Upon reviewing his calls and messages, they discovered that he had received numerous threats in the past few months, not from established criminal organizations, but from new anonymous accounts. This raised important questions. If the mafia was involved, why did all the evidence point to Nathaniel? Why were there so many coincidences? Could the threat have been staged? These uncertainties marked a shift in the investigation, leading detectives to suspect that there was more to the case than just gang-related crime. As the investigation approached its conclusion, Nathaniel felt the pressure mounting. He realized that the police were closing in on him and that arrest was imminent. His panic intensified when he noticed he was being followed. He tried to reassure himself that the mafia would protect him, but deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Desperate, he reached out to his mother. They met in a secluded location. Away from anyone who might overhear, he explained that he was in danger, facing serious accusations, and needed to disappear. However, instead of offering help, she showed fear and hesitation, recognizing that assisting him would involve her in the crime. For a few days, Nathaniel tried to hide, but surveillance cameras caught him at a grocery store with Ermelinda. Once the police confirmed their location, a chase ensued. Patrol cars surrounded the area, but Nathaniel and Ermelinda managed to get onto the highway. He was driving while she sat beside him, calmly observing the chaos. The critical question was who was really in control. Nathaniel thought he was. But everything was unfolding according to Ermelinda's plan. The police pursued them for miles, but Nathaniel had no intention of stopping. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, speeding through traffic. He was overcome with fear as he tried to escape. Ermelinda remained eerily calm beside him, never asking him to stop or pleading for him to give up. As they sped into a congested area of the highway, Nathaniel attempted to maneuver around a truck, but lost control. The car skidded, crashed into the guardrail, and rolled multiple times before coming to a halt. When officers reached the wreck, the inside of the car was disturbingly quiet. Nathaniel was still in the driver's seat, holding a gun, and Ermelinda was lifeless next to him. In the moments leading up to the accident, he shot her before taking his own life. Investigators reconstructed the scene to understand why he acted this way. Was it revenge? A final outburst? Or had he realized who was truly behind everything in those last moments? Had Ermelinda revealed her role during their final ride? Unfortunately, there were no answers, as the only two who knew the truth were gone. However, the investigation did not end with their deaths. Detectives meticulously examined their last movements, phone records, and messages. Initially, they believed Ermelinda was a victim, manipulated by a dangerous man. Yet, the deeper they dug, the more complex the real story became. A significant breakthrough occurred when they analyzed Ermelinda's devices. Her laptop and phone held a wealth of messages, numerous fake accounts, and logs detailing visits to sites associated with surveillance and social engineering tactics. Forensic experts quickly connected the dots. Ermelinda had orchestrated the entire facade of threats to convince Nathaniel he was being pursued by a criminal organization. Even more incriminating were her messages, where she directed his actions, leading him toward a predetermined conclusion. Logs, records, IP addresses, and chat histories all indicated that she was the mastermind behind the scheme. She didn't merely exploit Nathaniel's fears. She meticulously guided him down a path of ruin. The recovered files revealed that this manipulation had been ongoing for over a year. Not just weeks. This was no emotional breakdown or crime of passion. It was a carefully planned strategy. She had studied psychological manipulation, researched surveillance methods, and tested ways to control someone's mind. When the truth emerged, the case transformed completely. What initially appeared to be jealousy revealed itself as a chilling psychological game, with Ermelinda as the true mastermind. Ironically, her own lies led to her destruction. She tried to control everything until the end, but ultimately, she became a victim of the illusion she created. She manipulated Nathaniel into committing crimes, made him believe in a false reality, and in the end, he turned against her. Although the case was officially closed, many questions remained. Did Nathaniel realize the truth before it was too late? Or did he die still, thinking he was just a pawn in a non-existent conflict? There were no clear answers, only the stark reality that the most dangerous weapon is not a bullet or knife, but a lie strong enough to destroy someone from within. It was past midnight when something strange happened. A dog was sniffing the ground near a quiet riverbank. Suddenly, an unmistakable, pungent stench rose from the ground. Something terrible was buried there. What followed was a horrifying discovery. The bodies of the girls so decomposed that they could only be identified by their feet, all bound, their throats slit, and their mouths gagged. Just days earlier, the three young women had set off on what was supposed to be a fun trip. They told their families they were going to the beach with friends, but they never returned. What happened to them? The answer would shock the nation. The truth was darker and more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. In the heart of Santo Domingo, Ecuador, three young women, Juliana Macias, Denise Reina, and Nayeli Tapia, were full of dreams and ambitions. They had met through mutual friends, and their connection grew quickly, rooted in their shared passions for music, modeling, and a better future. Juliana, nicknamed Syria after the Greek goddess, was known for her intelligence, determination, and cheerful spirit. She excelled in school, earning the honor of being her class's flag bearer. But her true passion was music. With a strong singing voice and big ambitions, she dreamed of studying psychology, becoming a famous singer, and traveling the world. At just 21, Juliana was already performing solo, singing at political events, and had recently joined a band called Las Diablitas. To her, success felt closer than ever. Nayeli, 22, was admired for her warmth and generosity. A devoted young mother to her 4-year-old daughter, she had moved from Quito to Santo Domingo to live with her sister. Between modeling gigs and caring for her little girl, she dreamed of moving to Spain, believing it would open doors to a brighter future. No matter how busy life got, being a mother always came first for her. Denise, only 19, was a kind and thoughtful young woman studying agricultural engineering. She loved helping others and once dreamed of opening a veterinary clinic, but later focused on finishing her degree. Her new goal was to move to the United States and build a fresh start. She always thought ahead, carefully planning her future. But even the best laid plans can't prepare someone for what's to come. On Tuesday, April 4, 2023, their lives took a devastating turn. Around 9:00 a.m., a black car arrived at Denise's house. She had been invited on a trip to the Casablanca Hotel, a resort by the coast. Something inside her hesitated. She didn't feel right about going. But despite her unease, She got into the car. Later that day, she and the driver picked up Nayeli, who had just returned to Santo Domingo. That afternoon, both young women reassured their families. They were heading to the coast with friends. That night, they picked up Juliana, who told her grandmother she was going to meet a friend. What began as an innocent late-night road trip was about to spiral into tragedy. At 11:10 p.m., Nayeli sent her sister a live location with a chilling note. She was sharing it just in case. Moments later, her phone went silent. No calls, no replies. The sudden, heavy silence was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. Elsewhere that same night, Denise also reached out to a close friend. Her message carried a haunting weight. She admitted she had a bad feeling, that something awful might happen, and if it did, she wanted her friend to know just how much she loved her. As the night stretched into the early hours of the 5th of April, one of Denise's relatives received a message claiming she was still with Nayeli and some friends. Around the same time, Juliana uploaded a video status. The girls were in a car, singing, smiling, their voices blending with the music that filled the night. Then, silence. Morning came, but the girls did not return. Their phones went dead. No posts, no calls, no trace. Their families, gripped by panic and confusion, waited desperately for news that never came. On Wednesday, the 5th of April, Juliana's aunt, Rueda, a well-known women's rights activist, took the first step. She went straight to the authorities and reported her niece missing. A day later, on Thursday, the 6th of April, a group of fishermen made a horrifying discovery near a riverbank. One of their dogs began digging furiously at disturbed earth. As the men approached, a foul stench filled the air. Beneath the soil lay the partial remains of a body. Police rushed to the scene. When investigators began digging, they quickly realized the horror was far greater. There wasn't just one body. There were 3, all bound at the wrists, all showing signs of torture. The injuries were deep, savage, and clearly caused by sharp weapons, likely machetes. Forensic teams worked quickly to recover the bodies and transport them for autopsy. The confirmation came within hours. The victims were Denise Reyna, 19, Juliana Macias, 21, and Nayeli Tapia, 22. 2 of them had been found with their mouths taped shut, dressed in light beachwear, bathing suits and shorts. The news devastated their families. Many had still believed the girls would return home alive. Instead, they were met with the unimaginable reality of walking into a morgue. Paulina, always at the forefront, handled the identification of Juliana, but the injuries to her face were so severe that she could only be recognized by the shape of her toes. In the days that followed, the families gathered, piecing together every detail of what they knew from that night. Whispers of something sinister surfaced. They believed the killers might have used chemicals to speed up decomposition. Some even feared acid had been involved. Authorities, however, remained tight-lipped. One official said the forensic results were confidential. Another dismissed the acid theory as speculation from grieving relatives. The public was shaken. News of the murders spread quickly, igniting outrage across Ecuador. Social media flooded with grief, anger, and demands for justice. Photos of the 3 young women, once symbols of joy and promise, now became a national outcry. Their families were vocal, insisting the investigation must continue until the truth was uncovered and those responsible were held accountable. As investigators pressed forward, early theories began to take shape. Then, the autopsy results arrived, and they confirmed the worst fears. The examination revealed that all 3 had died from deep slash wounds to the neck, inflicted by a sharp, bladed weapon. Their bodies bore unmistakable signs of torture, details almost too horrific to speak aloud. On the 9th of April, 2023, the families laid their daughters to rest in Santo Domingo. The funerals were heartbreaking, filled with tears and tributes. Family and friends chose to remember them for the happiness they brought to others during their lives. During the service, Paulina Rueda, Juliana Macias' aunt, was approached and threatened by a man in a cap and mask. Before she could respond, he disappeared into the crowd. The threat sent waves of fear through the grieving families. For days, Nayeli and Denise's relatives pulled back from the media, choosing silence over danger. But Paulina refused to be silenced. She went public with the threat and requested inclusion in Ecuador's witness protection program. Authorities initially promised to accompany the families and evaluate their case. But according to Paulina, protection never came. Even so, the fight for justice only grew stronger. Despite fear and uncertainty, the families of all three young women eventually stepped forward to speak with a local news outlet. They shared memories, stories, and the dreams that Juliana, Nayeli, and Denise would never have the chance to fulfill. None of them knew who the friends were, that the girls were supposed to meet that night. All they wanted were answers, justice, and closure. They also pleaded with the public to come forward with any information that might help identify those responsible. But as their voices grew louder, so did the noise. Online rumors began to swirl. One particularly cruel claim suggested the girls may have been linked to banned substance trafficking. Paulina quickly shut those allegations down, making it clear there was no evidence to support such rumors and urging the public not to spread misinformation that only distracted from the investigation. A video added further fuel to the fire. It showed Juliana singing at a bar alongside a man named Roberto Zambrano and a small group of others. Some insisted it had been filmed just hours before the murders. But Roberto himself stepped forward, clarifying that the video was recorded weeks earlier during his birthday celebration. He had nothing to do with the crime. Still, the damage to his name was severe. His career, reputation, and family life were thrown into chaos, forcing him to announce plans to file a defamation lawsuit. Paulina confirmed his account, stressing that the video was completely unrelated to the case. As time went on, more rumors surfaced, some collapsing under the weight of evidence, others fading into silence. Meanwhile, investigators pressed forward. Then came a breakthrough. Police identified the black vehicle that had picked up the girls. It was a rental car, using GPS data. They reconstructed the route taken that night. Every turn, every stop, every mile traveled before the murders. Near the site of the shallow graves, they uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. One of the victims' cell phones, abandoned by the killers. It would soon become a key element in the pursuit of justice. In the wake of national outrage, Ecuador's Attorney General's office activated its official protocol for investigating femicides and violent crimes against women. The brutality of the case had horrified the nation, and now every eye was fixed on the investigation. Journalists followed every lead, and every new detail became headline news. Yet behind the scenes, progress was difficult. Much of the case remained under wraps. Officials announced that the full investigative report would remain sealed for at least 1 year. The lead prosecutor admitted that the remote location of the crime posed major obstacles. There were no nearby security cameras and no eyewitnesses, or at least none willing to speak. But the silence would not last forever. Soon, investigators reported another breakthrough. Through security footage, emergency response systems, and cooperation from local residents, they identified 2 men who had been seen with the victims on the 4th of April. These men became prime suspects. Still, investigators remained guarded, needing time to compile enough technical evidence to hold up in court. Meanwhile, the families refused to remain quiet. On May 3rd, nearly a month after the disappearances, they organized a massive demonstration, a white march, held on Friday, May 6th. Rueda, always leading from the front, declared that the march was not only about demanding justice, but also about urging the nation to stop normalizing violence against women. She vowed they would not rest until the killers were behind bars. Then came a dramatic announcement. In a police operation code named Armageddon, the Minister of the Interior confirmed the arrest of 2 men, believed to be directly responsible for the murders. Brothers Andre Zambrano, 27, and Holger Zambrano, 34. The pair had been attempting to flee toward the Peruvian border. One of them already had a criminal record for extortion. A judge swiftly ordered the freezing of their assets and granted extended protection measures to witnesses and the victims' families. But the case didn't end there. Investigators soon uncovered more names connected to the crime. One of them was Omar Ordóñez, a close associate of the Zambrano brothers. In November 2023, he was tracked down in a neighboring province. Omar wasn't just a friend of the brothers. He had links to a criminal organization and a past filled with illegal weapons charges. The fourth suspect, Luis Fernandez Votza, was believed to be the driver of the car that transported the girls on that tragic night. But authorities never got the chance to question him. His body was later discovered, dismembered, in what investigators called a targeted killing. At first, prosecutors filed charges of femicide, but later reclassified them as murder. The reasoning, according to court documents, there was no proof of a romantic or emotional connection between the suspects and the victims. But to Paulina, that argument was insulting. To her, it didn't matter if these men were strangers. This was violence against women in its most brutal form. Then came the courtroom battle. Holger, who rented the car, was acquitted after proving he wasn't present during the killings. But Andre and Omar faced trial on April 9, 2024. Prosecutors brought forward forensic reports, autopsy results, and testimonies from witnesses who had seen the accused with the victims. Even staff from the car rental agency took the stand, sealing the chain of evidence. On May 17, 2024, 1 year and 1 month after the murders, the verdict finally came down. The court sentenced Andre Zambrano and Omar Ordóñez to 34 years and 8 months in prison. They were also ordered to pay $300,000 in reparations to the victims' families, plus an additional fine of more than $600,000. Outside the courthouse, Paulina spoke through tears. She described the relief that swept over the families for the loved ones of Juliana, Denise, and Nayeli. It had been a year-long fight. Now, at last, they could breathe. But even then, the case wasn't closed. The defense immediately filed an appeal. On October 22, 2024, the provincial court upheld the original ruling. 34 years and 8 months behind bars for both Andre and Omar. It was a historic moment in Ecuador's battle against gender-based violence. Still, the defense threatened to push the case to the National Court of Justice. The last possible appeal. This case didn't just scar the nation, it sparked a movement. Juliana, Denise, and Nayeli were more than just victims. They were daughters, students, a mother, dreamers. 3 women full of life and purpose. Stolen in an act of senseless cruelty, their story changed the conversation around femicide in Ecuador, and their families refused to stay silent. Easter Sunday, 2015. In the sky above England, Victoria Cilliers, a veteran female soldier who has completed more than 2,600 jumps, plunges from a height of 4,000 feet. It should have been a routine jump, but as soon as she pulls the cord, she realizes the horrifying truth. Her main parachute does not open. She quickly switches to the backup parachute, but it does not work either. In the middle of the air, Victoria falls freely at a speed of 96 kilometers per hour, completely helpless, believing that the last seconds of her life are numbered. However, in an unbelievable way, she survives, and that is when the real nightmare begins. Because the more the police investigated, the more they realized that this was not an accident. This is a sophisticated murder plan, arranged by the person she trusts the most. Victoria grew up east of Edinburgh with her parents, Veronica and Michael. She had a comfortable upbringing, attending the expensive Edinburgh Academy. However, her teenage years were difficult as her mother developed cancer. While her mother was ill, Victoria, at age 16, did her first charity parachute jump to raise money for cancer research. This experience ignited her love for skydiving. At age 22, Victoria became a physiotherapy officer in the Royal Army Medical Corps. She served in a field hospital in Kosovo and achieved the rank of captain. While her military career was successful, her personal life was challenging. 4 years later, she married Captain Liam Fitzgerald Finch. However, they spent much time separated, and Victoria suspected him of infidelity. Ultimately, she ended the marriage. After her first marriage ended due to distance and cheating, she believed she might never find love again. At 29, she dedicated herself to her work with the Ministry of Defense, helping injured soldiers recover from their deployments. But in the winter of 2009, her life took an unexpected turn. Émile Cilliers, a Royal Artillery sergeant and physical training instructor, sought treatment at Victoria's Center for a knee injury from a skiing accident during his army service. He was captivating, and Victoria remembered feeling special whenever he smiled at her. Soon after their initial meeting, they began a relationship. Unbeknownst to Victoria, Émile was still married to Carly, with whom he had 2 children. When Victoria learned the truth, Émile claimed he had married Carly for visa reasons and was in the process of divorcing her. Overwhelmed by his charm and declarations of love, Victoria accepted his explanation. In 2011, Émile and Victoria got married in Cape Town, South Africa. Victoria felt like her dream had come true. A new beginning with a loving husband ready to start a life together. Soon after, they had their first daughter. Despite Victoria's struggle with postpartum depression, they seemed like the ideal military couple. Émile was likable, ambitious, and appeared completely dedicated to Victoria, who believed she had finally found her happy ending. However, Victoria would soon discover that her seemingly perfect life could turn into a nightmare. In May 2013, the first problem arose when Émile asked Victoria for money, and she sent it to him. When she asked why, he claimed his wages had been mixed up at work, a reason Victoria accepted because she wanted to trust him. 2 months later, Émile moved £6,000 from Victoria's account to his without her consent. He told her that her account had been hacked, and again, Victoria believed him. In hindsight, she would recognize this as the start of a growing pattern of financial manipulation. As Émile and Victoria's relationship progressed, Émile's behavior became more concerning. He accumulated debt and spent Victoria's money, offering weak explanations like errors in his paycheck. Even more troubling, he frequently disappeared for extended periods. One of Victoria's friends accused him of sending inappropriate messages to her 16-year-old daughter. Additionally, Victoria found emails from an adult club on the family computer that were addressed to him. Victoria discovered condoms both at home and in Émile's car. She also found suspicious messages on his phone from other women. These messages included conversations where he mentioned plans to visit them, possibly related to an adult club. The most shocking news came when Carly brought Émile's children for a visit. As Victoria wrote in her book, Carly casually said something that stunned her. Carly assumed Victoria knew about the other children. Émile had never told Victoria that he had 2 older children with a woman named Nicoline in South Africa before he had his 2 children with Carly. Victoria worried about Émile's lack of honesty, but she was trapped in a cycle of manipulation. Émile would show remorse, cook her meals, and leave love notes around the house. Each time she considered leaving, he would pull her back in with promises and explanations. She had no idea that her husband's deception ran far deeper than she could imagine. Émile Cilliers was born in South Africa in 1980. His parents were Zahan, a preschool teacher, and Stoltz, an engineer. He grew up in a small town known for farming and mining. He attended a private school for Afrikaner children and was raised in a strict Christian home. Even as a teenager, Émile was known for his interest in girls. At 16, he pursued Nicoline, a 13-year-old. Nicoline was flattered by the attention from an older boy and found him handsome, confident, charming. She recalls his charisma and romantic gestures, like giving her a long-stemmed rose on their monthly anniversary. Even as a teenager, Émile displayed manipulative behavior that would later affect his relationships. Nicolene initially ignored his cheating because she was charmed by his romantic gestures. He frequently cheated on her, but she always forgave him. In June 2000, when Nicolene was 16, she gave birth to their first child, Silene. Emile proposed using his grandmother's ring in a grand and romantic gesture to show how serious he was. However, Nicolene postponed the engagement upon discovering he was having an affair with her best friend. Emile was working in Oxfordshire, England, as a farmhand and bartender when his daughter Silene was born. He returned to South Africa in 2002 and rekindled his relationship with Nicolene. Soon after, Nicolene became pregnant with their second child, Trevor. However, within a year, Nicolene received shocking news. Emile's mother, Zahan, informed her that Emile had married another woman, Carly Taylor. Emile had met Carly in an Oxford pub in 2001 and married her in 2003, all while still assuring Nicolene of their future together. In 2006, despite being heartbroken, Nicolene moved to Britain and settled in Somerton. Later, Silene expressed a desire to meet her father, so Nicolene contacted Emile. He was now living in Larkhill, Wiltshire, and serving in the British Army. Emile replied right away, stating that he was getting a divorce and that his marriage to Carly was only to resolve a visa issue. Nicolene and Emile then rekindled their relationship, which turned out to be a grave error. 4 weeks into their relationship, Emile was at work when his mobile phone rang. He had forgotten it at home, so Nicolene answered it. The caller was Carly. Nicolene told Carly she knew Emile was separated, but Carly corrected her. They then decided to confront Emile at his house. Nicolene recalls that Emile was very surprised, with his reaction being one of complete shock. He started speaking in Afrikaans. Knowing Carly wouldn't understand, after his initial shock wore off, Emile tried to act cool and confident, looking back and forth between them. In November 2014, Emile went to Austria for a month with the army ski team. His wife, Victoria, they was about 6 months pregnant, with their second child at the time. Emile told Victoria the trip was mandatory training, but he was lying. While in Austria, Emile used the dating app Tinder and met Stephanie Gohler, a 36-year-old skydiving instructor. He told Stephanie that his marriage to Victoria was over, that Victoria had been unfaithful, and that he wasn't the father of her unborn child. So, while Victoria was at home, pregnant and taking care of their first child, Emile started an affair with Stephanie. This affair would eventually lead him to plan a murder. In December 2014, Emile lied to Victoria, telling her he was going on a work trip. Instead, he spent New Year's week in Berlin with Stephanie. The trip was a lavish affair, including a spa costing over $700 per night, which Emile paid for with money he had secretly borrowed from Victoria. While Emile was in Berlin, a debt collector came to Victoria and Emile's home. Emile had borrowed money from a loan shark. The debt collector was there to intimidate him and his pregnant wife. Victoria was aware that Emile had debts and had already lent him 19,000 British pounds to help him repay them. Not knowing that he was using her money to fund his affair, in February 2015, Stephanie stayed with him for a week at his barracks in Aldershot. Including Valentine's Day, Victoria had just given birth to their son. While her husband was spending the most romantic day of the year with another woman, the investigation uncovered the truth about Emile's lies. He had been unfaithful to Victoria throughout their 6-year marriage, as evidenced by posts on FabSwingers. He also visited escort service. Victoria was unaware that Emile was living a double life. In January 2015, Emile texted Stephanie that from April onwards, he could do random and spontaneous things. He also told Stephanie that he regretted marrying Victoria, calling it a stupid mistake. These words foreshadowed a tragic future. On March 29, 2015, Emile met Stephanie, whom he saw from time to time. Later, wanting to intimate while not with Stephanie, Emile texted his ex-wife, Carly, to meet up. He then lied to his current wife, Victoria, telling her he had to stay at the army barracks that night. Before leaving for the barracks, Emile went to the kitchen and used pliers and a wrench to loosen the nut on the gas valve. Victoria and their 2 young children were asleep upstairs. By tampering with the gas valve, Emile endangered their lives to gain his freedom. The next day, Victoria smelled gas in the kitchen, suspecting a problem. She called Emile. He shockingly told her to turn the gas on, but she refused. Trusting her gut feeling, Victoria jokingly texted her husband whether he was trying to kill her. Unbeknownst to her, he was. Her refusal saved her life, preventing his first attempt to murder her. Luckily, she noticed the leak before it was too late, but Emile wasn't finished. The failed gas leak only strengthened his resolve to find another way. Time was running out, and Victoria had no idea her husband had already decided she had to die. After the gas leak, Emile pretended to want to fix his relationship with Victoria. He proposed a family Easter weekend and offered her a skydiving session as a gift. Victoria, a seasoned skydiver and instructor with 2,654 jumps, viewed this gift as a fresh start. She had taken a break after their second child was born and was eager to jump again. On the 4th of April, 2015, the day before Easter, they went to Netheravon Airfield for a parachute jump. The jump was cancelled due to bad weather, which seemed disappointing. However, Emile had a plan. Instead of returning his wife, Victoria's parachutes, he hid them in their locker at the airfield. He told Victoria they could try again on Easter Sunday. He then took her parachute rig into the airfield toilets and tampered with it. During the trial, a demonstration showed that the sabotage could be done in a toilet stall in a little over 5 minutes. Emile knew what he was doing. According to the prosecution, he twisted the main parachute's lines to stop it from opening and removed parts from the reserve parachute. This sabotage required specialized knowledge of parachute packing. Only someone very familiar with how parachutes are packed would know which parts to remove and understand that doing so would cause the parachute to fail completely. The specific way the parachute was tampered with indicated it wasn't a simple equipment malfunction. The next morning, the weather was still bad, so they decided to do a hop and pop in the afternoon. A hop and pop is a jump from a low altitude where the parachute is opened right away. At her husband's trial, Victoria said she went back to the airfield alone on Easter Sunday. She wasn't excited about the jump anymore, but her husband convinced her to do it. Victoria also said that she remembered the pilot smiling at her as she jumped. Those were likely the last normal moments of Victoria's life. As an avid skydiver, the jump should have been routine for her. That Easter Sunday afternoon, the aircraft ascended to 4,000 feet above the Wiltshire countryside. Victoria made the leap. Only when her standard parachute failed did she realize something was drastically wrong. Her extensive training caused her survival instincts to kick in immediately. She deployed her reserve parachute, but watched in horror as it, too, failed to open properly. Now in full freefall, she reached a speed of 96 kilometers per hour as the ground rushed towards her at terrifying speed. Victoria later described that moment, saying that she remembered feeling tearful and scared, thinking that that just wasn't right. She didn't have time to consider that she might die. Her training took over as she fought to control her descent, desperately trying to slow her fall with what remained of her malfunctioning equipment. The impact was devastating. Victoria sustained life-threatening injuries, including a broken pelvis, fractured ribs, a fractured spine, and a collapsed lung. Those who witnessed the fall were so convinced she was dead that they brought a body bag to the scene. Fortunately, the ground was mercifully soft due to recent plowing. When the first responder reached her, he noticed that the lines on one side of her parachute were knotted. He soon realized that the soft links, or slinks, connecting the harness to the parachute were missing. Victoria had survived what seemed impossible. As she lay broken in that field, she had no idea that the man she loved, the father of her children, had just tried to murder her. And this wasn't even his first attempt. Victoria miraculously survived a 4,000-foot fall. When she woke up in the hospital, her husband, Emile, was there. She told him that she loved him, but he didn't respond. As she recovered from her severe injuries, Emile visited less and less often. And when he did, he seemed distant. Victoria later remembered that even though his employers gave him compassionate leave, he still went to work. She felt lonely in the hospital. She also noted that Emil didn't seem interested in her, and he never brought her gifts or cards. He asked Victoria, who was in the hospital, to sign insurance papers to start a personal injury claim. She found this insensitive, considering her condition. Unbeknownst to her, while at her bedside, he was messaging his girlfriend. He falsely claimed in a WhatsApp message that he and Victoria were legally separated and had split up months earlier because she cheated on him and hid her pregnancy. He also falsely claimed she said the baby wasn't his after a paternity test. These lies were later used as evidence against him. Initially, police had no reason to suspect foul play in what appeared to be a tragic skydiving accident. That changed when a friend of Victoria's approached the detectives with concerns about Victoria's relationship with her husband, Emil. The friend expressed doubts about their seemingly perfect marriage and suggested that if Emil had been near the parachute center during the incident, they should consider him a suspect. This tip proved remarkably accurate. Emil had indeed been at the skydiving facility on that Easter Sunday in 2015. Witnesses confirmed seeing him carrying Victoria's skydiving equipment after taking their infant daughter to the toilet. A crucial detail that would later become significant in the case: a parachute expert said Victoria's parachute had been checked 16 times by 10 experienced packers. The most recent inspection was 2 months before Easter, and the crucial components called slinks were present each time. However, after the accident, the British Parachute Association's investigation discovered a disturbing truth. Both Victoria's main and backup parachutes had been deliberately damaged. The slinks, essential for safety, were missing. This was not an accident but a murder attempt. 4 weeks after the fall, on the 28th of April, 2015, Emil Cilliers was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder related to the sabotaged parachute and was interviewed at Guildford Police Station. He denied committing any crime. However, as detectives delved deeper into his life, they uncovered a web of lies, debts, and betrayals that painted a very different picture of the devoted husband. The truth was about to be revealed, and it was more shocking than anyone, including Victoria, could have anticipated. The investigation uncovered the shocking details of Emil's secret life: multiple affairs, large debt, visits to adult clubs, plans to harm Victoria, and proof that he controlled her. Specifically, the investigation revealed his affair with Stephanie Goller, whom he met while skiing. He also confessed to using dating apps, visiting swingers clubs often, and hiring escort service. Reviews Emil posted on Fab Swingers about alleged encounters suggest he had been unfaithful throughout their 6-year marriage. The most concerning information involved Emil's actions at a now-closed adult club in Salisbury, managed by Ricky Harwood. Court testimony and police records showed that Emil frequently visited the club while married to Victoria. There, he engaged in increasingly risky activities, suggesting he had lost control. All of this happened while Victoria was at home, raising their children and working multiple jobs to provide for the family. Evidence presented showed that Emil was £20,000 in debt. He had hoped to claim a £120,000 life insurance payout from his wife's accidental death to clear his financial woes and start a new life with Stephanie. The motive was becoming crystal clear. He wanted his wife dead to collect her life insurance and begin anew with his mistress. Investigators later linked the earlier gas leak to Victoria's case, discovering that she had been targeted twice in the same week. It was clear that Emil had deliberately deceived everyone he knew. Detective Inspector Paul Franklin's team spent 2 years investigating Emil, concluding he was a sociopathic narcissist. They found he manipulated and exploited those around him. He fathered 6 children with 3 women, 2 with Nicolin in South Africa, 2 with Carly, and 2 with Victoria. He promised each woman a future, controlled them, and then abandoned them for someone else. Victoria's reaction to the investigation complicated the case. Despite strong evidence against her husband, she defended him. This was due to the coercive control he had over her during their relationship. She even visited him in prison. Later, Victoria explained that she couldn't distinguish between truth and falsehood and felt trapped. She wanted the investigation to end so they could resume their lives and she could have her husband back. Victoria's behavior highlighted the damaging effects of coercive control. Even after almost being killed, she struggled to believe that her husband, whom she loved, had tried to murder her. She confessed that she couldn't understand how someone who claimed to love her could try to take her life. The trial began in Winchester Crown Court in October 2017. After 7 weeks, the jury couldn't agree on a verdict, and the trial was stopped. Victoria's defense of her husband and the complicated psychological aspects of the case made the jury uncertain. However, the prosecutors pursued the case. In May 2018, a second trial resulted in Émile Cilliers being found guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder. He received a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years. Throughout the trials, Émile showed almost no emotion. He claimed Victoria had tried to end her own life, and suggested a stranger had tried to kill her. Detective Inspector Paul Franklin noted Émile showed no remorse for what he did. He lied during both trials, but he was ultimately found guilty and received a long prison sentence. Victoria's recovery was a long and arduous process. She spent several months in the hospital and underwent multiple surgeries to repair her injuries, with her broken pelvis alone requiring extensive treatment. Pelvic fractures are among the most serious bone injuries, often necessitating months of rehabilitation and sometimes resulting in permanent disability. Even her broken spine, fractured ribs, and collapsed lung, Victoria faced a recovery that medical experts described as miraculous. While most pelvic fractures become increasingly stable around 6 weeks after the event and typically heal within 3 months, Victoria's injuries were so extensive that her healing process took considerably longer. After Émile was found guilty, Victoria kept visiting him in prison. He had such a strong influence over her that she still had trouble believing what he had done. During these visits, Émile tried to persuade her to get back together with him, but eventually, Victoria couldn't deny the truth anymore. She told him she wanted a divorce, which she said made her feel free. Victoria said that, looking back, she finally understood everything. When Victoria finally decided she wanted a divorce, Émile refused to sign the papers, requesting more time to discuss the viability of their marriage. In other words, despite his 2 attempts to kill her and countless betrayals, he still believed they had a future together. His crimes had a widespread impact, affecting not only Victoria but also his children. Now, they struggle with the knowledge of their father's true character. In a documentary, Silene expressed her anger, saying that she had thought he loved her deeply. She said he had paid so much attention to her, and she couldn't understand how someone who had made her feel like their entire world, their favorite person, could just vanish. The children now know that their father not only abandoned them, but also attempted to murder their stepmother. Victoria lives in Wiltshire with her 2 children and works as a physiotherapist for the Ministry of Defense. She rebuilt her life after a difficult experience and is now in a relationship with Simon Goodman, a former Royal Marine Commando. In 2024, Victoria and Simon married in a small, private ceremony at a register office, starting a new chapter in her life. Victoria has written a book about her experience called I Survived, sharing her story of manipulation, abuse, and ultimately, survival. The memoir details not just the day of the attempted murder, but the story of an abusive marriage and how seemingly small misdemeanors can escalate into something much more dangerous. Émile Cilliers is currently serving a life sentence after receiving 2 convictions for 2 counts of attempted murder. He is being held at Dovegate Royal Prison in Staffordshire. Justice was served, but some wounds take a lifetime to heal. Victoria's bravery in telling her story can help other women spot danger signs early on. This could prevent them from experiencing a similar situation where they feel lost and betrayed, wondering how someone who claimed to love them could endanger their lives. This case had no positive outcomes. However, Victoria's resilience prevented her husband's betrayal from ruining her future. Furthermore, her children will grow up understanding that her strength saved not only her life but theirs too. It all began on a warm spring afternoon in late May 2011. Alyssa decided to go fishing alone along the Platte River. She packed her gear and drove out to the Platte Falls Conservation Area, a serene spot with a boat ramp that locals often visited when they needed peace and quiet. The next day, June Unst, a man taking his lunch break near the conservation area, was walking along the riverbank when he noticed something unusual in the shallows. What he found would send shockwaves through Platte County. Stranded on the shore and partially submerged in the water was the body of a woman, wearing only a bikini top. The body was later identified as that of Alyssa Faye Shippert, 22. When authorities arrived, it was immediately clear this was no accident. The scene bore signs of violence. Deputies noted severe trauma to Alyssa's head, blood on the ground, and even bone fragments scattered near the bank, suggesting a brutal attack had taken place, just steps from where she'd been fishing. From that moment, the Platte County Sheriff's Office launched one of the most unsettling investigations the region had faced in years. Just upstream, her car sat untouched at the boat ramp. Her fishing gear was still nearby, as if she had simply stepped away. News of Alyssa's death spread quickly through Platte City, a town where most people knew each other by name and family roots stretched back generations. The questions came just as quickly. Who could have done this? Why here, in such a familiar place? And most painfully, why Alyssa? Alyssa had grown up in Platte City. After high school, she hadn't followed the traditional college track, but instead chose hard work and independence, holding a cashier job at Casey's General Store. But work was only part of her life. She loved fishing, especially along the Platte River. To those who knew her, it was more than just a hobby. It reflected her personality. By the morning of the 1st of June, 2011, the Platte Falls Conservation Area was as peaceful as ever. 2,300 acres of woods, trails, and water managed by the Missouri Department of Conservation. But that serenity shattered when deputies secured the scene where Alyssa's body was found. They quickly established a perimeter, marking off the muddy riverbank where the attack had clearly taken place. The evidence spoke of a sudden and violent confrontation that left a young woman's life cut short, and a community desperate for answers. When reported about the incident, medical personnel arrived quickly at the scene. The county medical examiner pronounced Alyssa dead on site. Early observations pointed to blunt force trauma as the likely cause of her injuries. Her identity wasn't immediately clear. No wallet, no phone, no form of identification was found with the body. Deputies began cross-checking local missing person reports, and it didn't take long for a lead to surface. Alyssa Faye Shippert had already been reported missing the night before when she failed to return home or answer calls from her family. The description, along with her vehicle records, matched. Dental records and forensic testing would later confirm it beyond doubt. The body pulled from the Platte River was Alyssa. With that confirmation, the investigation shifted into high gear. Sheriff Richard Anderson and the Platte County Sheriff's Office mobilized detectives and crime scene technicians. They treated the riverbank like a grid, photographing and mapping every section. Evidence, from bone fragments to trace material, was carefully collected and bagged. Search teams spread into the surrounding woods, while divers from the Missouri State Highway Patrol scoured the riverbed for anything the current might have carried away. The conservation area itself became part of the investigation. Trails and parking lots were checked for tire impressions, discarded items, or any clue of suspicious activity. Rangers who patrolled the area were questioned, but no one had reported anything unusual in the days prior. Based on environmental factors, the spring temperatures and the river's steady, but not flooded current, investigators estimated the body had been in the water overnight. That detail suggested Alyssa may have entered the river near the boat ramp not far from where she was found. At a press conference, officials released only limited details. They urged the public to come forward with tips and set up a dedicated hotline through Greater Kansas City Crime Stoppers, Anonymous callers could even qualify for a reward. Meanwhile, the medical examiner transported Alyssa's body to the morgue for a full autopsy. Preliminary findings confirmed what the scene already suggested. Her head injuries were extensive, the result of violent force. Toxicology and other tests would refine the timeline of her death. Back at the lab, forensic teams worked with what little evidence they had from the riverbank. The current had washed away much of the DNA, leaving few biological traces behind. With physical evidence limited, investigators turned to Alyssa's world, the people who knew her, and the life she had lived. Alyssa's father described her as a kind-hearted daughter who had just cut her long hair to donate to cancer patients and was preparing to help tornado victims in Joplin. Alyssa's sister remembered her as a free spirit with a radiant personality who loved nature and cherished her relationships. Nothing in her background hinted at conflicts, grudges, or enemies. For detectives, that painted a troubling picture. If Alyssa wasn't the type to make enemies, then who had wanted to hurt her? Investigators next turned their attention to Alyssa's social circle. Friends described her as easygoing, deeply connected to her church, and focused on a simple routine of work, family, and time outdoors. The detectives probed her love life, asking if she had been seeing anyone or had been under any stress recently. Nothing stood out. At her workplace, Casey's General Store in Platte City, co-workers shared a common image of Alyssa as kind, approachable, and often mentoring new employees. She enjoyed chatting with customers and never mentioned any conflicts. Several colleagues remembered her talking about her fishing trip that day, excited for a few quiet hours on the riverbank. No one recalled hearing about arguments or threats. Despite interviews and repeated reviews of her phone records, the investigation stalled. Summer faded into fall, with no major breakthroughs. The autopsy confirmed Alyssa had suffered devastating blunt force trauma, consistent with a heavy object. But without the murder weapon, detectives had little to anchor their case. Then, in the early hours of the 26th of December, 2011, everything changed. Around 4:00 a.m., deputies were called to an apartment in Farrellview, about 10 miles from Platte City. Inside, they found a 21-year-old woman brutally attacked with a razor. Her abdomen had been slashed open. Though unconscious, she was rushed to the hospital and miraculously survived. When she regained consciousness on the 30th of December, she identified her attacker as a man she knew casually, a name that stunned investigators: Quentin Odell. Quentin was no stranger to the case. He had worked with Alyssa at the same convenience store, blending into the small-town community without raising suspicion. In fact, he had even been inside Alyssa's family home, chatting with her father on occasion. With no prior criminal record, his name surfacing in connection to such a violent attack shocked both detectives and locals alike. Detectives brought him in for questioning on the 5th of January and 6th, 2012. What Quentin told them left even seasoned investigators shaken. He admitted that on the afternoon of May 31st, 2011, he had gone to the Platte River and encountered Alyssa while she was fishing. According to his statement, he entered the water and pretended to drown, luring her closer. When she approached, a confrontation broke out. Quentin described how both of them reached for the small hatchet he carried on his belt. He struck Alyssa in the back of the head, causing her to collapse, crying in pain. Then, in chilling detail, he admitted kneeling down and striking her repeatedly in the face with the hatchet until she stopped moving. Afterward, he dragged her body into the river before heading back home, where he showered and went to bed as if nothing had happened. In another version of events, Quentin claimed Alyssa had angered him during their encounter, triggering a sudden outburst of violence. He framed the killing as an impulsive act rather than premeditation. Prosecutors, however, saw it differently. The very fact that he carried a hatchet and used it so deliberately spoke to intent. In late December, at the Federal View Apartments, Quentin admitted visiting the 21-year-old woman, his lover, on the 26th. During his first interview with investigators, he insisted he had left her alive and injured her. But in a later statement, his story shifted. He claimed he overheard her arguing on the phone with a recent boyfriend, which set him off. According to Quinton, he grabbed a razor blade from the kitchen table, then left the apartment. He said he went home and only realized the next morning that his hands and shirt were stained with dried blood. He admitted to quickly discarding the shirt. This version of events, however, was far from complete. After his confession linked him to both incidents, authorities moved quickly. On the 7th of January, 2012, Quinton, then 22, was formally charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action in Alyssa's case, along with related charges for the December attack on the woman. 21. Later, in June 2012, prosecutors filed additional charges tied to the Fairview assault, including forcible, intimate connected to a deviant abuse act during the razor attack. The 21-year-old victim had survived, and her statements, combined with forensic evidence, confirmed the assault. Bond was set at $2 million, underscoring the gravity of the crimes, and Quinton was held in custody. In Alyssa's case, no abuse charges were filed. Her autopsy determined the cause of death to be multiple blunt force injuries to the head. With no evidence of abuse assault, Quinton confessed that their confrontation escalated, leading him to strike her with a hatchet before dragging her body into the river. Alyssa's body was later found partially clothed, wearing only a bikini top. Investigators noted that she had gone fishing on a warm spring day, likely wearing swimwear for comfort. The missing lower garments were never fully explained, possibly lost during the struggle or carried away by the current. Prosecutor Eric Zond sought the death penalty, arguing that the brutality of the crimes, combined with Quinton's betrayal of Alyssa's kindness, demanded the harshest punishment under Missouri law. The state painted Quinton as a predator who followed a pattern of calculated violence. Meanwhile, Quinton's defense team fought to save him from execution. They pointed to his lack of a criminal record and framed his actions as reactive rather than premeditated, particularly the fatal struggle by the river. They pushed for a plea deal, warning that emotional testimony during a jury trial could easily tip the scale toward death. Their strategy worked. On the 24th of January, 2013, Quintin P. Odell appeared in Platte County Circuit Court and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, 2 counts of armed criminal action, first-degree assault, and abuse. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to drop their pursuit of the death penalty. Quinton was sentenced to life without parole for murder, plus consecutive sentences totaling 100 years for the other crimes. At his sentencing, Quinton apologized to both victims and their families. The judge accepted the plea deal and handed down the sentence, ensuring Quinton would spend the rest of his life behind bars in a Missouri state prison. Love can be beautiful, but sometimes it can become a destructive force. For some, the emotion spirals out of control, blurring the line between passion and obsession. And as today's case shows, when that obsession simmers in a twisted mind, it can explode into unimaginable violence. In the twisted mind of a killer, unrequited love is not just pain. It becomes an excuse to kill. One seemingly ordinary evening, a happy newlywed couple was brutally murdered, leaving behind their 7-month-old baby. What really happened to them, and who was behind this horrific crime? Mountain City, Tennessee, United States, is a quiet town with a population of just over 2,000 residents and a remarkably low crime rate. In such a close-knit place, most people know one another by name or face. The town itself is modest, with only a few notable establishments, one large general store, a gas station, and a bar. Yet, it was in this unassuming community that one of the most disturbing crime stories in recent United States history unfolded. Billy Payne Jr., born on July 10, 1975, in North Carolina, was remembered as an optimistic and warm-hearted man deeply loved by his family. From childhood, he developed a fascination with coin collecting, spending weekends browsing flea markets and estate sales for rare finds. Beyond his hobby, Billy had a love for the outdoors. He enjoyed fishing, riding ATVs, and camping in the nearby mountains. By 2010, Billy had settled in Mountain City, where he worked as a machine operator at a textile factory. Around that time, he met a young woman named Billie Jean Hayworth, born on March 19, 1988. Despite their 13-year age gap, the two quickly formed a strong bond. They not only worked together at the factory, but also shared passions for an active, outdoor lifestyle. Coincidentally, they also shared the same first name. Like Billy, Billie Jean enjoyed garage sales and flea markets. Though rather than coins, she sought out unique trinkets and household treasures. After only a few weeks of dating, Billie Jean moved in with Billy, and before long, they welcomed their first child, a son named Tyler. For Billie Jean, this was the life she had always dreamed of. She had longed to build a family of her own, yet relationships with men, her age had always fallen short. With Billy, she found not only love, but stability and devotion. To her family, she often confided that she had finally discovered what true affection meant. Tragically, this newfound happiness would be cut short far too soon. On the morning of January 31, 2012, at about 10:45 a.m., one of Billy's neighbors stopped by the house. Billy had a habit of getting the newspapers for his neighbors, and they will take it later. As usual, the neighbor headed to the back door, expecting to find the day's newspaper waiting. But this time, it wasn't there. He also noticed Billy's door was unlocked. In Mountain City, leaving doors open was common, even in the 2010 second, but the missing newspaper struck him as odd. The neighbor called out for Billie Jean, asking about the paper, but there was no response. Growing uneasy, he stepped inside. He called again for Billy and Billie Jean by name, but the silence was unsettling. Then, faintly, he heard what sounded like a baby whimpering. With both family cars in the driveway, he knew they must be home. Something was wrong. Following the sound, he pushed open the bedroom door and was met with horror. 36-year-old Billy Payne lay lifeless in bed, his face bloodied from a gunshot wound. Shocked, the neighbor cried out for Billie Jean and hurried through the house. Moments later, in the basement, he found her body. Billie Jean, just 23, had been shot in the head. In her arms, miraculously alive, was 7-month-old Tyler. Panicked, the neighbor ran outside, screaming for help, while his girlfriend dialed the police. When officers arrived, they began a meticulous examination of the scene. Billy's injuries were gruesome. In addition to the fatal gunshot wound to his face, his throat had been slit and he had several stab wounds. Investigators determined those wounds had been inflicted after death. The gunshot alone had been instantly fatal. Billie Jean, too, had died from a single gunshot to the right side of her head. Police theorized that Billy was attacked first, while Billie Jean was killed shortly after as she tried to flee with her baby in her arms. Forensic experts meticulously examined the house, yet they found no fingerprints or DNA evidence linking to the attacker. Whoever committed the crime had been well prepared, leaving investigators with few immediate leads. There were no signs of forced entry, which was not unusual given the town's habit of leaving doors unlocked. A neighbor later confirmed that Billy rarely locked theirs. From the arrangement of the bodies and the overall condition of the scene, detectives concluded that robbery was not the motive. Nothing had been taken. Instead, the killer seemed motivated only by the desire to kill. Eventually, investigators uncovered their first crucial pieces of evidence: shell casings. One was discovered in baby Tyler's chair, another beside Billie Jean's body, and a third on the bed where Billy Payne had been shot. The bullets themselves were carefully recovered from the victims' bodies and analyzed. One, in particular, stood out. It bore X-shaped notches. This detail was alarming. Such modifications are considered a military tactic. Bullets, altered in this way, are designed to fragment upon impact, causing catastrophic internal damage, heavy bleeding, and drastically lowering any chance of survival. The bullet retrieved from Billy's body had shattered, while the one from Billie Jean's head was still intact. Despite this difference, both bore the same distinctive notches. Because of this, detectives initially theorized that the victims might have been targeted by someone with military experience, or even a professional hitman. But the lingering question was, who could have harbored such a deep grudge against them to arrange something so brutal? Investigators began mapping the victims' social circles, interviewing friends, relatives, and neighbors. The first useful witness was Billy Payne's father, Albie, who lived in the same house. On the 31st of January, he had left for work around 5:30 a.m. He recalled nothing unusual that morning. Billy was asleep, and Billie Jean was awake feeding baby Tyler. Albie explained that some mornings a coworker picked him up, but that day he had left early on his own. When police spoke with the coworker, he confirmed driving by around 6:00 a.m. But when no one answered the door, he assumed Albie had already left. From this, detectives pieced together a timeline. Billy and Billie Jean were likely killed between 5:30 a.m. and 6:00 a.m. With Albie cleared of suspicion, investigators turned their attention to others in Billy and Billie Jean's orbit who might bear hostility toward them. Their focus soon narrowed to Janelle Potter. Janelle's behavior immediately stood out. The Potter family was known in Mountain City for their reclusiveness and eccentricity. Since moving there in 2004, they had rarely interacted with neighbors and were largely disliked within the community. Janelle's father, Marvin Potter, often boasted of being a former CIA agent and Vietnam War veteran. Her mother, Barbara Potter, who had once worked for Hewlett-Packard before becoming a homemaker, was equally unconventional. Together, the parents maintained strict and unusual control over their children. The Potters had two daughters. The younger one, Christina, eventually rebelled against this control. By 2009, she had left home and moved in with her grandmother in Mountain City, where she built a normal, independent life. Her relationship with her parents deteriorated further after her escape, to the point where she later filed a restraining order against them. Janelle, on the other hand, remained firmly under her parents' grip. At 30 years old in 2012, she still lived at home and relied entirely on their supervision. The control extended far beyond daily life. Her parents restricted her education and even her access to the internet, citing early diagnoses of developmental delays. Janelle also suffered from diabetes, which her parents often used as another justification for their overprotectiveness. Even as restrictions eased over time, Janelle seemed unwilling, or unable, to step outside of that sheltered existence. Unlike Janelle, Christina integrated smoothly into the community after leaving home. When police questioned her, she provided crucial insight into the family's dynamics. The Potter family was widely regarded as strange and unapproachable, and Janelle carried that same reputation. She rarely left the house, preferring online friendships over real-world interactions. In 2009, she met Tracy, Billy Payne's sister, at a local drugstore. Despite the Potters' notoriety in Mountain City, Tracy sympathized with Janelle and befriended her. They spent time together, and Tracy even visited the Potter household. Janelle also met Billy Payne during this period. Shortly before he began dating Billie Jean, Tracy later recalled how unusual it was that Janelle, then 27 years old, still sought her parents' permission to maintain a friendship. Janelle first met Billy Payne in 2009, less than a year before he and Billie Jean began their relationship. Once Billy and Billie Jean became a couple, Janelle began claiming she was the target of online harassment. She insisted that Billie Jean was jealous of her and responsible for the threatening messages she said she received. Janelle took her complaints to social media, publicly posting accusations and speculations about Billie Jean's supposed behavior. When detectives visited the Potter's home, Marvin Potter immediately grew defensive, declaring that his family was always unfairly blamed for the town's problems. Janelle herself claimed that Billie Jean and Billy Payne were stalking her. According to Janelle, the harassment began shortly after they met. She alleged that Billie Jean had created multiple social media accounts to send her threats and had even driven past her house, shouting menaces of abuse and murder. The detectives also considered another suspect, Jamie Curd. Jamie was both a co-worker and second cousin to Billy Payne. In the past, their relationship had been close, almost brotherly, but around 2010, tensions rose, and during one workplace argument, Jamie was overheard threatening to slit Billy's throat. Tracy told investigators that Janelle had shown an interest in Jamie because her parents forbade dating. Janelle presented Jamie as someone good with computers, who was simply helping the family with technical issues. This excuse allowed her to see him regularly. Over time, Jamie provided Janelle with a secret cell phone so they could communicate privately, hidden from her parents. When questioned, Janelle denied being romantically involved, insisting they were just friends, a lie that only deepened investigators' suspicions. When Janelle became convinced that Billie Jean was stalking her, she confided in Jamie. This created a rift between Jamie and his cousin Billy Payne. Billy, dismissing Janelle's claims as delusional, referred to her as a crazy woman, which fueled Jamie's anger further. Police brought Jamie in for questioning. At first, he denied everything, both any role in the murders and his relationship with Janelle. He even agreed to a polygraph test but failed every question. Under pressure, Jamie eventually cracked. He admitted to being at the Payne residence during the killings, but insisted that he had not pulled the trigger. According to him, the shooter was Marvin Potter. Jamie confessed only to slitting Billy's throat after Billy had already been shot. Jamie was arrested on February 7, 2012, about a week after the murders. To strengthen their case, detectives had Jamie place a recorded phone call to Marvin in hopes of coaxing a confession. However, Marvin grew suspicious, sensing that Jamie was fishing for information, and avoided specifics. Detectives then returned to the Potter residence. This time, Marvin appeared hostile. At one point, he even reached into his pocket, and officers feared he was going for a weapon. They immediately arrested him and brought him in for questioning. After hours of interrogation, Marvin finally broke. He admitted his role, explaining that he believed people were constantly tormenting his daughter and that he had been forced to act to protect her, at any cost. A subsequent search of the Potter home revealed a disturbing cache. Dozens of firearms were hidden in closets, under beds, and even left out in the open. Knives were scattered throughout the house. Investigators also found printed photographs of Billy Payne and Billie Jean, many taken from Billie Jean's social media. The most unsettling images were of Billie Jean, defaced with crude insults scrawled in red marker. Detectives later confirmed that Janelle had downloaded and printed these photos herself. In the middle of the evidence collection, Janelle even snatched one of the defaced pictures and tore it up. She later claimed she did so out of nervous tension, but investigators did not believe her. When police inspected Marvin's car, they discovered several .38 caliber revolvers and ammunition, identical to the type used in the murders. Some of the bullets had distinctive notches on their tips, the same as those recovered at the crime scene. They also found garbage bags filled with shredded documents, cut into thin strips but not completely destroyed. The material was collected and sent to the lab, where forensic experts spent over a month painstakingly reconstructing the papers. Meanwhile, rumors circulated through the small town. Many locals suspected that Janelle and her mother were the real masterminds, manipulating Marvin and Jamie into carrying out the killings. Tracy, Billy Payne's sister, too was convinced. Jealousy drove Janelle to orchestrate the crime, but despite the suspicions, investigators still lacked solid evidence to arrest Janelle. The turning point came when detectives analyzed the Potters' computer. Instead of uncovering proof that Janelle had been harassed, they found the opposite. Threatening messages, supposedly from outsiders, were in fact written under accounts linked to Marvin's name. These messages simultaneously praised Janelle and insulted Billie Jean, revealing a twisted narrative Janelle herself had created. Meanwhile, Barbara Potter's behavior only deepened investigators' doubts. Even after Marvin confessed, she insisted that he had been home with her the entire night of the murders. Strangely, she appeared less distressed about her husband's arrest than about the fact that their plan had fallen apart. After Marvin and Jamie were jailed, Barbara and Janelle became regular visitors at the local library, often spending hours on the public computers. Witnesses recalled how they continued to spread stories online, portraying Janelle as the victim of relentless stalking. It seemed like a calculated attempt to sway public opinion. Even as evidence mounted against them, forensic experts finally pieced together more than 100 pages from the shredded papers. They contained screenshots, photographs, and printed emails, materials heavily centered on Janelle's supposed victimization. This digital trail pointed not to Marvin, who lacked computer skills, but to Barbara and Janelle as the true architects. Among the documents, one name appeared repeatedly: Chris. According to the Potters, Chris was a CIA operative who had been corresponding with them online. They claimed his mission was to protect Janelle from cyberstalkers. Barbara and Janelle both swore they had been in direct contact with him. To outsiders, Chris was portrayed as a mysterious guardian angel. In reality, no one had ever met him or even spoken to him by phone. When investigators analyzed the emails attributed to Chris, the truth unraveled. The writing style, grammatical quirks, and spelling errors matched Janelle's own correspondence almost perfectly. The same linguistic fingerprints appeared in the threatening notes Janelle claimed to have received. Police concluded that Chris was nothing more than an elaborate fabrication, another fake persona Janelle invented to manipulate her parents, Jamie, and the community. Still, Barbara and Marvin clung to the fantasy. Their denial was so absolute that they ignored the obvious. Not once had anyone seen or heard from this so-called CIA agent. Janelle tried to shift the blame, claiming her computer had been hacked. But when detectives traced the IP addresses, every single message from Chris led back to the Potters' home computer. In August 2013, investigators finally gathered enough evidence to arrest Janelle and her mother, Barbara. Both were charged with orchestrating the double murder, their motive rooted in jealousy and obsession. The case against them was strong, not only digital evidence, but also testimony from key witnesses who confirmed the darkest suspicions. One of those witnesses was Jamie, who revealed the depth of Janelle's fixation on Billy Payne. From the moment she met him, Janelle developed an obsessive interest, though Billy never reciprocated. To him, she was merely an odd local figure, and her parents' suffocating control made any real friendship impossible. Even after starting a secret relationship with Jamie, Janelle is still obsessed with Billy. When Billy started dating Billie Jean, her obsession spiraled into resentment, and eventually, hatred. On October 3, 2013, Marvin Potter appeared in court. He did not deny his role in the killings, but claimed he acted to protect his daughter from what he believed was harassment by Billy and Billie Jean. Realizing too late that he had been deceived, Marvin confessed with a broken spirit. The jury found him guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Jamie Curd accepted a plea bargain. By cooperating with police and testifying against the Potters, he received a 25-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole. His testimony, however, proved crucial in building the prosecution's case. The trial of Janelle and Barbara began in May 2015. Prosecutors presented a wealth of evidence, including Jamie's detailed confession, He described how Janelle's anger intensified after Billy Payne began dating Billie Jean. She often raged that their relationship was doomed, and when the couple had a child, her hostility escalated into constant online slander and false accusations of stalking. According to Jamie's account, on the night of the 30th of January, 2012, he was at the Potter's home working on Janelle's computer. Marvin entered the room and asked for his help. He wanted Jamie to drive him to Billy Payne's house and wait outside. The plan was vague, but Jamie agreed. In the early morning hours of the 31st of January, Janelle called Jamie again, urging him to help her father. Jamie picked Marvin up, parked near the victim's home, and waited until Billy Payne's father left for work. Marvin then handed Jamie a gun, insisting he only wanted to scare Billy and Billie Jean. Moments later, shots rang out. Jamie, furious at Billy's insults toward Janelle, stormed inside and attacked Billy with a knife. Even though Billy was already fatally wounded from gunshots, at trial, the prosecution also introduced extensive digital evidence. Detectives had recovered over 2,800 pages of online activity referencing Billy Payne and Billie Jean. Janelle had created multiple fake accounts, sending herself threats to support her narrative of persecution, while simultaneously convincing her parents and Jamie that she was in constant danger. Some personas were loosely based on real people, most notably Chris, whom Janelle described as a CIA agent. In reality, Chris was a former classmate who had moved away and become a police officer. He testified in court, confirming he had no connection to the Potters' delusional web of lies. Janelle's defense attorney argued that she was too intellectually limited to orchestrate such a complex scheme. They portrayed her as emotionally stunted, under the complete control of her parents, and incapable of functioning beyond the level of a fourth grader. But the sheer volume of digital evidence and testimony from those who had seen her manipulation firsthand painted a very different picture, one of calculated deceit, jealousy, and obsession that had culminated in murder. However, the prosecutor firmly argued that despite her personal issues, Janelle was far from helpless. She was, in fact, a skilled manipulator. Barbara, too, was seen as a full accomplice. Investigators concluded she was just as guilty as her daughter, since she provided Marvin with information and helped spark the deadly attack. More than that, she deliberately pushed her husband into protecting their daughter and the family. Letters and messages revealed Barbara's active role in communicating with the fake agent Chris. Through him, she fueled the narrative that Billie Jean was supposedly the mastermind, driven by jealousy of Janelle's beauty, and that Billie Jean had even threatened to kill the entire Potter family. A story meant to justify their actions, but in reality, none of that was true. The tragedy started over something far more trivial. Billy and Billie Jean simply unfriended Janelle on Facebook, and she unfriended them. Janelle took deep offense, and in retaliation, she began catfishing, creating fake accounts, pretending to be other people, and sending threats. After a 7-day trial, both Janelle Potter and Barbara Potter were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Outraged, they kept insisting that the Potter family had nothing to do with the crime, but their appeals were denied. By now, all 4 members are in custody. The story of Billy Payne and Billie Jean Hayworth is a chilling reminder of how jealousy, manipulation, and obsession can escalate into unthinkable violence. What began as something as simple and seemingly harmless as a Facebook unfriend spiraled into a deadly chain of lies. In the end, 2 young parents lost their lives, leaving behind a newborn baby boy. Mountain City may have returned to its quiet routine, but the scars of this crime still linger, a haunting reminder that even in the most peaceful of places, darkness can take root.